Chapter 44-47. Now that things had come to this, he knew that it was unrealistic to completely negate this rule. The only thing he could do now was to minimize the unfavorable side of himself. Points. Boundless Sea pretended to laugh and shook his head. Head Escort Chi, you're thinking too much. The strength of all the participants must be limited to the Golden Core stage. As a Golden Core stage executive, if I can't even beat an opponent of the same level, and even have my points grinded away, isn't that a little too incompetent? What's the point of keeping such an incompetent executive? It's a good thing for every escort agency to get rid of this piece of trash early on. Head Chi, you're mistaken. If it's a limited number of 1v1 matches, then there's nothing to say if you lose. But if someone wants to drag you down with them, then no matter how strong you are, you'll eventually get tired. If you can't even guarantee fairness, then what's the point of this competition? Chi Mingyuan sneered. Seeing everyone nod their heads, Boundless Sea couldn't help but stare blankly. He re-evaluated Chi Mingyuan. He didn't think that this guy, who came from a martial arts background, would have such sharp words. Oh, Head Chi, why are you so agitated? Could it be that your interests have been harmed? Are you afraid that the Golden Core stage executive of your Heavens Equal Escort Agency will become an opening for others? You're one of the 5 great escort agencies. Why are you so unconfident? Boundless Sea asked back with interest. Head Chi, you're overthinking it. I'm just stating the facts. I have to fulfill my duty as a judge. Chi Mingyuan replied with a straight face. Alright, if Head Chi says that, then I'll also discuss the facts with you. The purpose of the Southern Continent Escort Agency Grand Conference is to test and improve the strength of each escort agency. As long as it's something that might happen in real life, it can be included in the competition. This is the principle. I'm sure Head Chi doesn't have any objections? Boundless Sea said confidently. No. Chi Mingyuan shook his head. Then let me ask you, when the Heavens Equal Escort Agency is escorted by the pirates, won't they take turns to fight you? They wouldn't be so reasonable as to negotiate a 1v1 with you escorts, and even decide the winner in one match, right? Boundless Sea sneered. The audience roared with laughter. Who would want to be a pirate? Not to mention deciding the winner in one match. Even a one-on-one match was nonsense. The pirates had always bullied with numbers. This, Chi Mingyuan suddenly choked. He was stunned for a moment before he said, even so, since it's a fair and just competition, the rules can't possibly leave such an obvious loophole. Wouldn't that allow people to blatantly farm points? Hehe, Head Escort Chi, you keep talking about loopholes and points. Aren't you feeling too guilty? Are you afraid that your own Heavens Equal Escort Agency won't do? Boundless Sea didn't try to hide his ridicule. Our South Continent Sea region is a place where the weak are prey to the strong. Let's not talk about whether or not there are any loopholes for people to farm points. Even if there are, everyone can use the rules to their advantage. In the end, it would only lead to one result. The weak would become weaker, and the strong would become stronger. Everyone would clearly know who was strong and who was weak. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that, right? Chi Mingyuan looked at everyone's reactions. Seeing that many people were nodding in agreement, his heart couldn't help but sink. For a moment, he didn't know how to refute. Boundless Sea's words could be said elsewhere. Perhaps he would be criticized for not being righteous. But in the South Continent Sea region, it just so happened to be the rule that everyone followed. Everyone did it themselves, so naturally no one would object. Of course, nothing can be accomplished without rules. This challenge for the head of the escort agency will be decided by drawing lots. Everyone will compete fairly based on their strength. Head Escort Chi, do you have any other opinions? How about we let the other judges vote together in front of everyone? Boundless Sea glanced at Chi Mingyuan. No need. There was no need to ask Zhao Bufan and the others' opinions. It was clear from their tacit agreement just now. Even a public vote wouldn't change the result. It would only make this rule more convincing. However, Chi Mingyuan couldn't just give up so easily. He turned and said, I just want to add one last point. The higher-ups of the escort agency should have a chance to breathe during the match, right? The situation was already completely under the opponent's control. Let alone completely rejecting this challenge rule. Qi Mingyuan knew that simply changing it wasn't realistic. Since things had already reached this point, he could only do it piecemeal and try to fight for one last chance. A chance to breathe? Boundless Sea's eyebrows jumped. He casually refuted. Are all the pirates that your escort agency meets so reasonable? Why would they give you a chance to breathe? What's impossible? Qi Mingyuan retorted. In reality, the pirates won't talk reason with us, but in reality, several escorts will fight together. If they run out of manpower, they can naturally retreat and rest. Is that so strange? Everyone nodded in agreement. After all, the leader of the escort agency was challenged by a senior golden core cultivator of the agency alone. If he was challenged consecutively and not given a chance to catch his breath, it would be somewhat unreasonable. That's a bit reasonable. Boundless Sea saw everyone's reactions and knew that he couldn't go overboard. In any case, a small concession didn't matter, so he said, if you want a chance to breathe, that's fine. But you can't rest forever. After all, if you really encounter pirates, you'll have no choice but to fight after a short rest. Otherwise, your companions will all die. Then how much time do you think is appropriate, Chief Escort High? Qi Mingyuan stared at Boundless Sea. A stick of incense. It can't be longer than that, Boundless Sea insisted. He glanced at Qi Mingyuan disdainfully. Chief Escort Qi, do you have any more questions? Qi Mingyuan originally wanted to argue a little more, but he sensed Boundless Sea's ill intentions. He suddenly shivered. He was afraid that Boundless Sea wouldn't say much, and would directly ask the judges to raise their hands to decide, or even accuse him of something. If that was the case, he wouldn't have to try. He could only choose to stop before going too far. Very good. Since there are no more questions, then everyone prepare yourselves. The 5th round of the escort agency competition is about to begin. Boundless Sea smiled proudly. At the same time, he didn't hide his disdain at Qi Mingyuan. A martial artist was a martial artist. How dare he quarrel with me in public? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Do you have the brains to do so? The audience discussed animatedly. They weren't looking forward to the upcoming escort agency competition, but rather the meaning behind Boundless Sea and Qi Mingyuan's sharp words just now. It was too thought-provoking. Chapter 44-48. At this point, anyone with a bit of knowledge could tell that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was being specially targeted this time. The challenge of the leader of the escort agency was almost tailor-made for them. In the eyes of other escort agencies, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was a piece of juicy meat. After 4 rounds of competition, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency had a huge lead of 400 points over the second-place team. Originally, they had already secured the first-place spot. However, the situation had changed once again. The existence of this final challenge would make the impossible possible in the end. Even Father can't do anything about it. This is really troublesome. When Qi Wenhan saw this scene, his expression immediately became more and more unsightly. He scratched his head and paced back and forth. Brother Qi, you don't have to worry. Since things have come to this, there's nothing more to say. We'll deal with whatever comes our way, comforted Lin Yi. That's what you say. But to see the great situation that Brother Ling painstakingly created be wiped out in such a shameless way, I really can't accept it. Qi Wenhan said angrily as he pounded his fist. Last time, he and the Heavens Equal Escort Agency were lucky enough to be ranked last among the top 5 escort agencies. This was already an unexpected surprise for him and the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. This time, because of Lin Yi's existence after 4 rounds, they had become the dark horse with the highest hopes of becoming the number 1. This feeling was like a dream. But now Boundless Sea's simple challenge was going to shatter this dream. Who would be willing to accept this? Brother Qi, I don't think there's a need to act like a little girl. Since they're deliberately targeting us, we'll just fight them 1 match at a time. For us, this is also a rare opportunity to score points, isn't it? Lin Yi smiled. But what if they are really so shameless? What if you brazenly use attrition warfare to wear them down? Qi Wenhan was still indignant. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said resolutely, Brother Ling, I can see that this matter is obviously aimed at you. I am truly sorry. You are participating in the competition for our escort agency, but instead you are being treated as the bird that sticks out. How about this? If someone challenges you later, you will be the one that sticks out. I'll take the lead." After all, he was the young master of the escort agency. Although he was still furious, Chi Wenhan's mental fortitude was far above that of an ordinary person. He quickly suppressed his anger and regained his rationality and calmness. Now that the situation had developed to this point, the ranking and points that he and the entire Heavens Equal Escort Agency had previously placed so much importance on were no longer important. Today was the final battle. Even if they were defeated, it would be a glorious defeat. After all, everyone present could tell that the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency was being maliciously targeted. That was why they were dragged down from their throne. At the very least, the previous 4 rounds of the competition were enough to engrave the name of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency into the hearts of the people. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. It would more or less affect the escort agency's business, and even block the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency's future prospects. However, it wouldn't be much worse than the current situation. At most, he would develop in the Verdant Arc Sea region. There would be a foothold there, and he wouldn't lose his job. In comparison, Chi Wenhan was most worried about Lin Yi's safety. Back then, Lin Yi had only agreed to participate in the South Continent Escort Agency's grand event after his repeated pleas. Lin Yi had made such a great contribution. If Lin Yi were to lose his life because of this, then the entire Heavens Equal Escort Agency would not be able to atone for their sins, even if they died 10,000 times. Brother Chi, you're the young master in charge of the overall situation. How can you personally participate in the competition? However, Lin Yi laughed and patted Chi Wenhan's shoulder. Since you said that you're here for me, I naturally have to participate. Otherwise, if I don't participate, these people will be very disappointed. They might even beat you to death. That's... Chi Wenhan froze, speechless for a moment. What Lin Yi said wasn't impossible, it was highly possible. According to the challenge rules, there was no limit to the number of times a contestant could challenge a Golden Core Stage senior of an escort agency. Even if they couldn't directly challenge Lin Yi, if Chi Wenhan were to challenge him first, the other party could easily kill him. If they continued to challenge him, Lin Yi would have no choice but to fight. So in the end, I still have to participate. Rather than taking such a meaningless and unnecessary risk, it's better to let me participate directly, Lin Yi said lightly. Sigh. Chi Wenhan could only sigh deeply, and didn't say anything else. He didn't know what to say. Just as Lin Yi said, even if he, the young master of the escort agency, took the lead, he wouldn't be able to change the situation. What could he do? Could he just resign himself to fate? Chi Wenhan frowned. On the other hand, Lin Yi, who was in the eye of the storm, was calm and unperturbed by the situation. In reality, after hearing Boundless Sea's challenge rules, Lin Yi's first reaction wasn't one of worry. Rather, he was quite happy. Although Lin Yi's strength was only at the middle stage of the Golden Core stage, he was the strongest Golden Core expert who had a perfect breakthrough. Coupled with his various trump cards, it was more than enough to say that he was invincible in the Golden Core stage. Moreover, Lin Yi wasn't like other experts. He wasn't afraid of taking turns to fight. With the endless supply of chi from the Jade Pendant, basically, no matter how many Golden Core opponents there were, they would all end up the same. They would be easily killed by Lin Yi. And at the same time, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency would gain a lot of points. There was no other possibility. More importantly, Wu Baoliang was the military advisor of the Dragon Boat Escort Agency. He was also part of the upper echelons of the agency. At the same time, he was also a Golden Core expert, which was completely in line with the challenge rules. Since others could challenge Lin Yi, naturally Lin Yi could also challenge Wu Baoliang. This was a very rare opportunity. He had come all the way to the South Continent Sea to represent the Heavens Equal Escort Agency in this South Continent Escort Agency Grand Conference. Wasn't it to deal with Wu Baoliang? Just like Cheng Haonan and the others, who were having a headache about how to ensure that they could face Lin Yi. Lin Yi was also having a headache about this. However, he didn't take the side road like the others. Instead, he wanted to let nature take its course. It would be great if he could meet Wu Baoliang. But if he couldn't, then he would think of another way. Even Lin Yi didn't expect this to happen. Everything was supposed to depend on luck. But a turning point like this popped up out of nowhere. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And since they'd sent themselves to his doorstep, there was no reason for Lin Yi to reject them. Chapter 44-49. But Qi Wenhan still wasn't at ease. He couldn't think of an effective countermeasure right now. But he couldn't just stand by and watch Lin Yi get attacked. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing, not even if he was beaten to death. In the worst-case scenario, even if he knew it would be useless, he had to take the lead. Even if it meant risking his life, he had to let everyone know that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's men were not to be provoked or bullied by anyone. No buts. Lin Yi cut him off without hesitation. Instead of worrying over nothing, Brother Qi, you should calm your heart down and think about the upcoming competition. That's what you should be doing right now. Alright then. We'll talk about this after the competition. Qi Wenhan's attention was immediately diverted. No matter how dangerous the challenge of the leader of the escort agency was, it was something to worry about later. The most important thing now was to think about how to deal with the competition. Putting aside the controversial additional challenge, the 5th round of the escort agency tournament was the highlight of the entire South Continent's escort agency festival. Not only did it determine the rankings, but it also showcased the true strength of each agency in this round of competition. 5 against 5. The rules are basically the same as the first round's escort robbery, but there's one less escort and a different scoring system. Qi Wenhan quickly got into the zone and analyzed. That's right. Although there's also a time limit of 1 incense stick, it doesn't count into points. Between the two escort agencies, the one with the most survivors will be the winner, and the winner will take 100 points from the loser. It doesn't seem like a big difference at first glance, but in terms of specific strategies, it's actually completely different. We'll have to make some adjustments. Lin Yi nodded. That's right. Brother Ling, you're an expert in this field. I'll listen to whatever you say. Qi Wenhan hurriedly asked humbly. How am I an expert in this field? I was just lucky. Lin Yi broke into laughter. He had only been acting as an on-the-spot coach on the spur of the moment, but now he was being treated as an expert. Brother Ling, you don't have to be so humble. The battle results are right there, and this is irrefutable evidence. No matter how humble you are, it's useless. Everyone can see it for themselves. Am I right? Qi Wenhan shouted at the escorts beside him. Yes, everyone agreed in unison. They couldn't help but be impressed. Lin Yi's on-the-spot guidance in the first round of robbing the escorts was indeed very effective, and the results could not be said to be bad. Especially when Qi Wenhan, the young master, supervised the escort guarding battle. When the two were put side by side, it was obvious who was superior. To the crowd, this wasn't just a mere compliment. It was something that would benefit them greatly. Based on their performance in the first round of robbing, if Lin Yi had been in command, they would have been able to survive. However, if Qi Wenhan the young master had been in command, but at least half of them would die. The difference between coming and going was huge. For these participating escorts, it could be the difference between life and death. Alright. Faced with everyone's expectant and excited gazes, Lin Yi had no choice but to surrender and agree. I will do my best to give advice and suggestions for everyone. That should be fine, right? The escorts instantly cheered, attracting the attention of the bystanders. They all looked at each other. These people from the Heavens Equal Escort Agency must have taken the wrong medicine. The battle hadn't even started, and they were already celebrating in advance? Brother Ling, quickly tell us, how should we deal with this escort agency competition? Qi Wenhan asked impatiently. There are two aspects. The on-the-spot battle is one aspect, and the planning outside the arena is the other. From a certain perspective, the latter may be more important than the former, because the former is only a tactic, while the latter is a strategy. Lin Yi immediately stopped trying to shirk his responsibility and analyzed the situation for the crowd. The crowd listened and looked at each other. Some nodded as if they understood, while others were completely confused. They had no idea what Lin was talking about. What Brother Ling means is that the most important thing is to make good use of the two opportunities to challenge and be challenged. Qi Wenhan understood immediately. That's right. The planning outside the arena determines the overall situation. If we can make good use of these four opportunities, we can achieve twice the results with half the effort and take the initiative. Otherwise, it will be troublesome. Lin nodded. The crowd finally understood. The rules of the escort agency competition only stated that each agency had 2 opportunities to challenge and 2 opportunities to be challenged. However, there were no restrictions on who would issue the challenge first or who would issue the challenge first. In other words, it was up to each agency to decide. In this case, the waters were getting deeper and deeper. For the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, there was nothing much to be said about the right to be challenged twice. They could only accept the challenge passively and did not have much of a choice. However, as for how to use the right to challenge twice, they would have to plan carefully. Who do we challenge? When do we issue the challenge? Qi Wenhan immediately grasped the crux of the problem. That's right. As long as we can handle these 2 key issues, everything else will naturally be solved, Lin praised. Qi Wenhan could not help but fall into deep thought. These 2 issues did not seem difficult. If he followed his train of thought, there would only be 2 strategies, one conservative and one radical. If they were more conservative, they would naturally be picking on the weaker ones. As long as they challenged the weaker escort agencies, their Heavens Equal Escort Agency's strength would be enough to guarantee them 2 victories. As for the remaining 2 chances of being challenged, they only needed to give it their all and fight as many battles as they could. In this way, with the first 2 victories, even if he lost the next 2 rounds, he could at least guarantee that he would not lose any points in this round of the escort agency competition. Due to the huge advantage accumulated in the first 4 rounds, even if the second-place Divine Wind Escort Agency won all 4 rounds, they would at most obtain 670 points, which was just enough to tie with the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. In other words, the worst result after the 5 rounds was to tie with the Divine Wind Escort Agency for first place, which was nothing unacceptable. This was the most conservative strategy. Apart from this, there was another more radical strategy, which was to not challenge the smaller agencies. Instead, they would directly challenge the prestigious agencies that could pose a threat to them. For example, if the second-place Divine Wind Escort Agency won, then they would be able to take first place without any suspense. Of course, everything had its pros and cons. If they failed, then they would have to bear the risk of being overtaken by the prestigious agencies. Not only would they not be able to maintain first place, but they might not even be able to maintain second or third place. Chapter 4450. If Qi Wenhan had to choose, he would definitely choose the first option to play it safe. However, with Lin Yi, who could turn something rotten into something magical, Qi Wenhan felt that even if he were to go up against a wealthy escort agency, his chances of winning would not be that low. After all, in the long run, if the Heavens Equal Escort Agency wanted to truly rise, they would have to go up against these traditional wealthy escorts. If they kept retreating, they would forever be a fake wealthy escort agency, and would never be able to truly become a force to be reckoned with. Moreover, there was another factor that had to be taken into consideration. The upcoming challenge for the head of the escort agency was clearly disadvantageous to them, so they had to prepare well beforehand. The greater their advantage in points, the more confidence they would have when the time came. Brother Ling, what strategy do you have in mind? Qi Wenhan pondered for a long time, but ultimately could not decide. He could only ask Lin Yi for help. My strategy is very simple. Let's wait and see. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Ah, how exactly? Qi Wenhan asked hurriedly. Ehe. The rules of the competition did not state that we have to make a decision within a certain period of time. We can just bide our time and see how the other agencies fare. Lin Yi said with a smile. But what if all the easy targets are snatched up by others, and what's left are hard bones to chew? What should we do then? Qi Wenhan could not help but worry. Each escort agency only had 2 chances to be challenged. Once the opportunity to challenge the weaker agencies was snatched up by the other agencies, it would be too late for the Heavens Equal Escort Agency to regret their decision. Brother Qi, do you think we, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, are strong or weak among the 32 escort agencies? Lenny glanced at Qi Wenhan. He did not answer but asked instead. This, of course we are strong. Qi Wenhan hesitated for a moment, then immediately insisted. Since we are strong, we should have the temperament of a strong one. Taking advantage of others is the right of the weak. It has nothing to do with us. Keep an eye on the truly threatening competitors, then wait for the right opportunity to strike. This is what we should be doing, Lenny said faintly. Brother Ling's advice is enlightening. I have learned a lot. Qi Wenhan was finally enlightened. In front of everyone, he bowed deeply to Lin Yi. Before this, his mentality had always been at the bottom of the 5 major escort agencies. He didn't have much confidence when facing those traditional wealthy families. However, after hearing Lin Yi's words, he came to a realization and broke out in cold sweat. He was 400 points ahead of the runner-up. If it wasn't for someone maliciously targeting him, he would have already secured the first place. As the young master of such an escort agency, if he didn't even have this little bit of magnanimity, he wouldn't be able to do so. How could he achieve greatness in the future? As the 2 of them spoke, Shanghai Wuliang had already announced the highly anticipated 5th round of the Escort Agency Championship. It had officially begun. As soon as Boundless Sea finished speaking, the representatives of the 5 escort agencies stood up at almost the same time and impatiently issued their challenges. They were challenging the same escort agency, 10,000 Miles Escort Agency. He was ranked 32nd. The total score of the 4 rounds was 0. This was one of all the escort agencies. It was the only escort agency that did not have a single cent, and the weakest among the 32 escort agencies was none other than the 10,000 Miles Escort Agency. As a small escort agency that was barely qualified to join the South Escort Agency Alliance, its combat strength was already so weak that it made people's hair stand on end. After the 3rd round of the test of the escort's loyalty, all 10 of the participating escorts defected, and the morale of the escort agency hit rock bottom. From the head of the escort agency to the ordinary escorts, all of them were dispirited and despondent. Any passerby could see that this 10,000 Miles Escort Agency was a piece of juicy meat. Anyone could easily snatch it away. There was no difficulty to speak of. The others didn't have the resolve of a powerhouse like the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Only an idiot wouldn't fight over 100 points. They're like dogs fighting over food. They don't give us any face at all. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh when he saw the depressed expression on the head escort's face. It's no wonder they're so nervous. Although every escort agency has 2 chances to be challenged, when it comes to the 10,000 Miles Escort Agency, there's clearly only 1 chance. If we miss this opportunity, we won't get another one. Qi Wenhan nodded. According to the rules of the Southern Continent Escort Agency Conference, if an escort agency had a negative score, the competition would be terminated, and they would be eliminated. The 10,000 Miles Escort Agency had 0 points right now. It could still be challenged by other escort agencies, but once its score dropped to negative 100 points, it would be eliminated. The other escort agencies wouldn't be able to gain points from it. Being challenged by 5 escort agencies in one go made him the center of attention. Everyone was pointing at him. This feeling was so depressing that he wanted to die. The 10,000 Miles Escort Agency hesitated for a long time before they finally chose one of the weaker escort agencies. The 2 sides began to fight. Of course, none of the 5 escort agencies that jumped out to challenge the 10,000 Miles Escort Agency were among the top 5 escort agencies. After all, they were all wealthy escort agencies. If they behaved in an unsightly manner, they would be ridiculed by others. Qi Wenhan looked at Lin Yi gratefully when he saw this. If it weren't for Lin Yi's advice, he might have jumped out as well. Even if he didn't win this opportunity, his Heavens Equal Escort Agency would definitely become a laughing stock. The results of the opening match of the escort agency tournament were quickly revealed. The 10,000 Miles Escort Agency was in no mood to continue fighting. In the face of their ferocious opponents, they were powerless to resist. After surrendering 100 points, they were unsurprisingly eliminated. Following that, the eyes of the other agencies immediately turned to the next pushover. For most of the people in charge of the escort agencies, nothing else mattered except for the points they had earned. This time, the top 5 escort agencies still did not budge. Of course, it would be useless even if they joined in. Unless they were crazy, these popular agencies would never pick them as opponents. Not only would they not gain any opportunity by joining in, but they would also become a laughingstock. These were all experienced and astute traditional wealthy agencies. They were not stupid. Just as Lenny expected, the 5th round of the escort agency conference had been dominated by the lower-ranked agencies. After a full 2 hours, the top 5 escort agencies finally made their appearance. The first to take the stage was the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, which was like the sun in the sky. They did not take the initiative, but were challenged by someone else. Their opponent was an old rival from the first round, the Noon Horse Escort Agency. This time, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was caught unprepared. After all, according to Lin Yi's strategy, he was prepared to wait for the other competitors to make the first move. Now, however, they had no choice but to accept the challenge. R655. Chapter 4451. Is there something wrong with the Noon Horse Agency? They lost to us in the first round, and now they're biting us like rabid dogs. They even challenged us. Do they think we're pushovers? Shi Wenhan said angrily. He was really a little apprehensive about this erratic Meridian Horse Escort Agency. Although he won the first battle, he paid the price of 3 lives. It could only be said to be a Pyrrhic victory. If they were to fight again, he really did not dare to guarantee that he would win. In reality, the Noon Horse Agency was a classic example of strength being greater than reputation. Although they had placed 11th in the last competition, they were definitely in the top 10 in terms of strength. They're doing this to make a name for themselves. We're just being used as a stepping stone. Lenny glanced at the ranking. The Noon Horse Agency had a total of 160 points. It was ranked 13th out of all the agencies. Compared to its strength, it was not considered outstanding. It could barely be considered average. If it continued to develop normally, the Noon Horse Agency's best result would be to just barely squeeze into the top 10. As for becoming one of the top 5 agencies, that was pure wishful thinking. They had strength, but their points were not ideal. Seeing that there weren't many opportunities left, they might as well challenge the highly anticipated Heavens Equal Escort Agency. This was the fastest way to increase their influence. Stepping stone? How dare they? Shi Wenhan became even more furious. The Noon Horse Escort Agency was like a scar in his eyes. Every time he thought about how they had won the first round, he couldn't help but feel a little angry. His shame turned into anger, especially since the other party had climbed all over him and used his Heavens Equal Escort Agency as a stepping stone. Brother Chi, there's no need to be angry. From their point of view, it's not wrong to think that way. First, although our points are high, we're just a dark horse in everyone's eyes. Our strength hasn't been truly recognized. Second, our performance in the first round may have made them feel that our strength is just SOSO. That's all there is to it. Lenny smiled indifferently. Humph. Those snobbish bastards. Shi Wenhan snorted coldly, unable to speak. Who told him to not perform well in the first round, giving the other party a chance to take advantage of him. However, being angry was just being angry. When he really had to face this Noon Horse Escort Agency, Shi Wenhan was still a little afraid. It was like a hedgehog with spikes all over its body, making people unable to bite it. Shi Wenhan did not have the slightest intention to challenge it, but now the other party was taking advantage of him. Instead, they had taken the initiative to stick to him. There was no way to avoid them. Now that things have come to this, there's no need to think about anything else. This battle is of utmost importance. As long as we do well, it'll be enough to serve as a deterrent to the other escort agencies, preventing them from acting rashly. However, if we make a mistake, the consequences will be unimaginable. Linny said solemnly to everyone. Everyone nodded. His Heaven's Equal escort agency had been in the limelight for the past 4 rounds of the competition. However, they did not have a strong record of fighting head-on battles. There were probably many people who were secretly dissatisfied with them, but they did not know what was going on. He just didn't dare to act rashly. This time, if the Noon Horse escort agency managed to create an opening, then in the eyes of the other escort agencies, the Heaven's Equal escort agency, which was at its peak, would no longer be the insufferably arrogant tyrant of the escort agencies. Instead, it was a delicious piece of juicy meat. Any escort agency, with the slightest bit of ambition, would definitely not let go of this excellent opportunity to make a name for themselves. He would definitely rush up and take a bite. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single day. Brothers of the Equal of Heaven escort agency, it's time for you to come in. Just like before, everyone who goes up to fight will be rewarded with 50,000 spirit jades. Those who are willing to fight step forward. Chi Wenhan shouted in encouragement. Yes, everyone responded in unison. Without hesitation, they stood up and lined up. Everything else aside, the Heaven's Equal escort agency's sincerity towards the escorts under their command was not inferior to any other escort agency. They all had the same thought about fighting for the agency. It was worth it. Lainey raised an eyebrow at the scene. There were more than 30 escorts present, and all of them were willing to fight for the agency. This level of morale was incomparable to that of the other escort agencies. Even the Heaven's Equal escort agency from 2 days ago could not compare to this level of morale. It was clear that the cohesiveness of these 2 days was not insignificant. Very good. This scene was beyond Chi Wenhan's expectations. He was overjoyed and turned to Lin Yi. Brother Ling, I'll leave the rest to you, including me. Whoever you say will go up. How you say we should fight, we'll fight. Haha, Brother Chi, you can forget about it. If the young master of an escort agency has to fight personally, no matter who wins or loses, others will look down on him. Lin Yi shook his head and laughed. He swept his gaze across the escorts in front of him, and finally picked out 5 of them. 1 Golden Core Paragon, 2 at the peak of the Late Golden Core Realm, and 2 at the Late Golden Core Realm. This was the lineup that Lin Yi had chosen. This level of strength could be considered as the Heaven's Equal escort agency's first echelon, but it was definitely not the strongest lineup. Lin Yi was deliberately conserving his strength. This was only the first round of the competition. He could not act like a gambler and go all out. After all, these escorts were not like Lin Yi himself. After a battle, his inner chi would be almost completely depleted, and he would not be able to recover in a short period of time. He could only rest on the sidelines, unable to continue fighting. Well, will this work? Chi Wenhan asked worriedly in a low voice. In his mind, even a lion would use its full strength to capture a rabbit. Moreover, the other party was from the horse escort agency, and they were not easy targets. If he underestimated them, he could easily lose. Regardless of whether it will work or not, I've already chosen them. I can't just change them at the last minute, can I? That's a taboo. Lin Yi looked at him with a playful expression. Oh, only then did Chi Wenhan react. He hurriedly covered his mouth in apology. Before, he had already said that he would leave everything to Lin Yi. If he interjected now, he would be eating his own words. Who did he want everyone to listen to? At this time, the staff of the convention came over to urge everyone to go up on stage. On the other side, the 5 participating escorts from the horse escort agency were already valiantly standing on the stage. Fuck, they're all men of sacrifice. No wonder this agency is famous for being crazy. Every single one of them is a lunatic. Chi Wenhan's eyelid twitched as he watched. The opponent's lineup consisted of 1 Golden Core Paragon, 1 at the peak of the Late Golden Core Realm, and 3 at the Late Golden Core Realm. In terms of strength, there was not much difference between their side. However, the aura that these 5 people exuded was clearly written on their faces. They were unafraid of death. 1 was a man of sacrifice, and 1 was an ordinary person. Even if their strength was the same, if they really fought, the man of sacrifice would definitely have a higher chance of winning. This was inevitable. Chapter 4452. When Qi Wenhan was guarding the escort, he had suffered this loss. This was also the reason why the Noon Horse Escort Agency was regarded as a tough nut to crack. Qi Wenhan could not help but feel a little guilty. The strength of the 5 participating escorts on his side was about the same as the other party. But if they really fought, they might be at a disadvantage. It looks like the Noon Horse Escort Agency has brainwashed these escorts quite a bit. Laney was slightly taken aback by the situation, but he did not reveal the slightest hint of worry. His expression remained the same. Brainwashing? Qi Wenhan thought for a moment before he understood what the term meant. He nodded heavily. Yes, brainwashing. I heard that the Noon Horse Escort Agency is managed like a military. 3 times a day, in the morning, afternoon and evening, the higher-ups of the agency have to give lectures. All they say is to be loyal to the agency and die for it. This kind of opponent is indeed not easy to deal with. The formation of death warriors is indomitable and unstoppable. Unless the opponent's strength is much higher than theirs, the average expert will be at a disadvantage. Laney nodded thoughtfully and turned to the participating escorts beside him. The 5 of you, what do you think? We'll follow escort leader Ling's instructions. The 5 participating escorts replied in unison. All right, let me ask a little aside first. Do you usually play games? Games that children often play, such as drawing a circle and chasing around in circles? Laney suddenly asked with interest. Play games? The 5 participating escorts, as well as Qi Wenhan and the others beside him, were instantly dumbfounded. Yes, we play games. I was thinking, since the other party is so aggressive, how about we play a game with them first? Laney said seriously. The crowd was speechless and looked at each other. If it was not for Lin Yi's miraculous performance that had convinced them, they would have suspected that there was something wrong with this guy's brain finally. Under the staff's repeated urging, the 5 participating escorts of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency slowly walked onto the stage with a strange expression on their faces. Meanwhile, Lin Yi, Qi Wenhan, and the others stood by the side of the stage to supervise the match. What the hell are you so slow for? No matter what, you're still the super dark horse of this year's grand meeting. Don't tell me that your Equal of Heaven Escort Agency is feeling guilty and afraid of our Noon Horse Escort Agency? The head escort of the Noon Horse Escort Agency, Wu Zonglong, who was supervising the battle, opened his mouth and ridiculed in an overbearing manner. Others might be intimidated by the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's heaven-defying momentum, but Wu Zonglong wouldn't be. Looking at the previous South Continent Escort Agency grand meetings, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency had never been able to gain an advantage over him. It was the same this year as well. How strong was the Heavens Equal Escort Agency? He knew this much better than the average person. It's not an important match anyway. The result has already been decided. Let's take it slow. What does it matter if it's a little earlier or a little later? Laney replied with a faint smile. There was an uproar outside. Based on the current rankings, the Noon Horse Escort Agency was indeed not even worthy of carrying the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's shoes. However, everyone knew that the Noon Horse Escort Agency was a tough nut to crack, even if it was the 4 Seas Escort Agency. They didn't dare to underestimate him too much. Wasn't he a little too arrogant? You've only managed to scrape up a lot of points by sheer luck. You haven't even fought a proper battle. You're not that strong, but you sure are arrogant. Wu Zonglong was instantly enraged. He was the absolute ruler of the Noon Horse Escort Agency. Once he lost his temper, the 5 men of sacrifice on the field would immediately put on an attitude of submission. He immediately assumed the attitude of a subordinate who would die if his master was humiliated. Like a mad dog, he could not wait to skin the people from the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency alive. If an average person stood in front of them, they would probably be so scared that they wouldn't even be able to stand. Even though the 5 escorts that Lin Yi had picked were not cowards, they still felt like mice meeting a cat in front of these people. They did not seem to be evenly matched opponents at all. A passerby agency that has only scored 160 points, which is only a fraction of our total points, Yet you're saying that we're arrogant. I'm speechless. I can only reply with 2 words, hee. Lenny continued to laugh mockingly. His calm and condescending attitude infuriated Wu Songlong to no end. At this moment, the audience had a completely different feeling. Although the head of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was talking tough, the 5 participating escorts on the field were all cowering in fear. It was as if they were frightened by the other party. No matter how they looked at it, this was not the demeanor of the best escort agency. You have a sharp tongue. You still dare to laugh at me? Let's see if you can still laugh later. Wu Songlong sneered and suddenly shouted. Brothers, they're the best escort agency, and they're looking down on the Noon Horse Escort Agency. What do you think we should do? Whoever dares to humiliate the Noon Horse Escort Agency will be crushed to pieces. The 5 escorts on the field roared in unison. They're really poisoned. This brainwashing. TSK. Lenny couldn't help but shake his head and laugh at this scene. He didn't say anything else because his goal had been achieved. The match had officially begun. As soon as the referee gave the order, a long stick of incense was lit at the side of the arena. The 5 horse escorts on the arena couldn't wait any longer. They roared angrily and pounced on the 5 members of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. In front of their ferocious momentum, the 5 members of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency were like quails. They didn't have any morale to resist. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency isn't a fake, is it? The audience couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What happened next only confirmed their suspicions. Facing the menacing Noon Horse Escort Agency, the 5 escorts from the Heavens Equal Escort Agency didn't have the awareness of the experts of the 5 Great Escort Agency. Their reactions were even worse than the weakest 10,000-mile escort agency. They didn't even think about fighting back. Instead, they turned tail and ran. The entire stadium was in an uproar. Everyone, including Boundless Sea and Qi Mingyuan, who didn't know what was going on, was dumbfounded. Not only did they not fight back in this kind of group arena, they turned tail and ran. This was the first time in the history of the Southern Continent's Escort Agency Association. The only consolation was that the 5 people from the Heavens Equal Escort Agency still had some sense of shame. At the very least, they didn't run off the stage. Instead, they ran for their lives. If they had jumped off the stage, they would have been eliminated, and the match would have ended there and then. Even so, the audience was still dumbfounded by the chaotic situation on the stage. The 5 Heavens Equal Escort Agency were being chased by the Noon Horse Escort Agency all over the stage. All of them had their hands over their heads and were running away like rats. They didn't have the slightest bit of resistance. Chapter 44-53. Initially, he was still a little worried. Although they had suffered heavy losses in the first round, they had still lost. Now, his worries had been thrown to the back of his mind. Morale was the most important factor in an arena deathmatch. Without morale, no matter how strong one was, they would not be able to unleash their full potential. How could the Heavens Equal Escort Agency have any morale left? If they were not afraid of being punished by the agency, the 5 participating escorts would have already raised their hands and surrendered. As Wu Songlong laughed, the 5 horse escorts seemed to have received a boost in morale. Every move they made became more violent and ferocious. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency, who was being chased around the arena, was like a small boat in the middle of a huge wave, in danger of being capsized at any time. Everyone who saw this could not help but break out in cold sweat for them. Hee, this round is already a sure win. We won't even need half an incense stick's time to decide the winner. Wu Songlong said confidently. He turned to his assistant and instructed, quickly prepare the list of challengers and wait for the judges. Once they're done here, submit the challenge request. Head Escort Agency, who are we going to challenge next? The assistant asked. Idiot, of course we're going to challenge the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Wu Songlong glared at him and said with a greedy expression, he's obviously a pushover. He can easily earn points and make a name for himself. I'm sure many escort agencies will be fighting to challenge him later. We can't let others take advantage of him. Yes, the assistant finally understood and quickly went to prepare the list. Haha, Challenging the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was a wise move. We've gained both fame and fortune. If this continues, we can look forward to becoming one of the top 5 escort agencies. Wu Zonglong said proudly. The situation was going so smoothly that even he could not believe it. Becoming one of the top 5 escort agencies had been his long-cherished wish for many years. Who would have thought that the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency would be such a perfect stepping stone, delivering itself right to his doorstep? Wu Zonglong was eagerly anticipating the outcome of the battle, so that he could take advantage of the situation to reap some benefits. However, half an incense stick's time had passed. Although the arena was still in chaos, not a single one of the 5 Heavens Equal Escort Agency had fallen. Not only that, the 5 of them were not injured at all. As the head of the Horse Escort Agency, even though Wu Zonglong was bent on using the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency as a stepping stone, his observational skills were not something an ordinary person could compare to. He could already sense that there was something fishy going on. Even though Zhang Xian couldn't tell what the other party was up to, he was certain that the 5 Heavens Equal Escort Masters weren't as cowardly as they thought they were. They were being incited by someone else. Don't waste time. Focus on killing one first. Wu Zonglong suddenly ordered. Yes, Escort Wu Ma on the stage was already feeling a little impatient. Hearing this, they immediately formed an encirclement formation. It was not a brilliant formation, but under the restrictions of the arena, it was enough to easily trap the opponent in a corner. Of course, the prerequisite for doing so was to temporarily let go of the other 4. No matter what, he had to get rid of one first. This way, even if the time for an incense stick to burn was up, he would still be able to get rid of it. It was also the Noon Horse Escort Agency's victory. At least there wouldn't be any accidents. 5 against 1. And the one trapped was the weakest late Golden Elixir stage expert of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. The drowsy audience immediately became excited. Based on the Noon Horse Escort Agency's usual style, no one would be able to save this pitiful worm. A smug expression returned to Wu Zonglong's face. He didn't know what the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was up to, but in the face of absolute power, all schemes and plots were just a joke. Unfortunately, Wu Zonglong had forgotten one thing. In terms of the true strength of both parties on the battlefield, the Wu Horse Escort Agency did not have any advantage at all. It was just that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's pathetic retreat had given him this subconscious misconception. There was no need for Lin Yi's order, and the other 4 Heavens Equal Escorts, who had been emptied on the stage, immediately changed from their previous cowardice to attacking together without hesitation. The speed of the change was shocking, and their target was the strongest Golden Core Perfected Master from the Horse Escort Agency. In the blink of an eye, it was still a farce. In the blink of an eye, the situation on the arena had become extremely tense. The audience watched with their eyes wide open, afraid to miss out on a good show. It was originally 5 against 1, but in the blink of an eye, it had become 4 against 1. This was because the Noon Horse Escort Agency, who had been targeted, would definitely not be able to fend for himself. It looked like they were about to exchange pieces. However, the difference was that once the pieces were exchanged, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency would lose their weakest late Golden Elixir stage expert, while the Noon Horse Escort Agency would lose their strongest Golden Elixir stage expert. No matter how one looked at it, it was a huge loss. Do you think we'll be afraid just because of this? What a joke. Eat the meat in your mouth first. Wu Zonglong was not flustered or afraid. Others might be afraid of this situation, but the Noon Horse Escort Agency was not. Based on their usual style, they would definitely withstand the pressure and kill the late Golden Elixir stage expert first. Then they would turn around and attack. The weakest late Golden Elixir stage expert would not be able to withstand the combined attack of everyone. However, the strongest Golden Elixir stage expert would have at least a 50% chance of surviving. Even if they were heavily injured, they would still have the upper hand in a 5 against 4 situation. A 50% chance of surviving was a risk that most people would not dare to take. However, these escorts who had been brainwashed by Wu Zonglong were definitely an exception. After all, they were people who had been trained to die on the spot. Unexpectedly, after hearing Wu Songlong's words, the corner of Lin Yi's mouth curled up slightly. Is that so? How pathetic and ignorant. Wu Songlong wanted to retort. However, before he could say more than a few words, the 5 Noon Horse Escort Agency members on the arena suddenly retreated in unison. They actually temporarily let go of the Heaven's Equal escort, who was trapped in the corner. Instead, they turned around and faced the 4 people behind them with a guarded expression. Are you all crazy? Why are you retreating now? You dare to disobey the orders of your chief escort agency? Wu Songlong was instantly enraged. Even the spectators outside the arena were in an uproar. Disobeying orders was something that would never happen in the Noon Horse Escort Agency. However, the scene before them was clearly slapping Wu Songlong in the face. How could they explain it? Hearing Wu Songlong's roar, the 5 Noon Horse Escort Agency members on the arena, especially the Golden Elixir stage expert, could not help but shrink their necks in fear. Originally, he had wanted to withstand the pressure and take the opportunity to kill the late Golden Elixir stage expert. It was not only him. Every single Noon Horse Escort Agency member had the same thought. Chapter 4454. But just now, for some reason, his body had inexplicably made an evasive movement. Even he himself did not know why. Haha, looks like this tactic worked. Lin Yi smiled faintly and nodded in satisfaction. Brother Ling, what tactic is this? How dare they disobey Wu Songlong's orders? Isn't this too strange? Qi Wenhan asked in disbelief. Just now, when arranging the tactic, in order to prevent it from being leaked, Lin Yi only gave instructions to the 5 participating escorts. Everyone else, including Qi Wenhan, was kept in the dark. Not only Qi Wenhan, but everyone present who knew a thing or two actually had this doubt. The Noon Horse Escort Agency was famous for its strict obedience. Under the circumstances where the strength of the escorts was not outstanding, it was also because of this that they were able to gain a foothold in the Southlands. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was their lifeline. But now, they don't really dare to openly disobey orders. It's just like how Wu Songlong insisted on brainwashing them. From just now, we have also been brainwashing them. It's that simple. Lin Yi smiled. Ah, brainwashing. Qi Wenhan's expression instantly became even more strange. How is that possible? Brother Ling, you didn't say anything to brainwash them? Brainwashing doesn't necessarily require words. Actions are enough. From the beginning until now, all the actions of the 5 escorts have been instilling a hint into the other party, making them subconsciously firm in their thoughts. Lin Yi said. What thoughts? Qi Wenhan scratched his head. Brother Qi, if it were you, and you encountered a group of opponents who covered their heads and fled as soon as they appeared, asking you to exchange lives with them one-on-one, do you know how to do it? Lin Yi asked instead of answering. Of course not. Knowing that the other party is not as good as you, who would be stupid enough to exchange lives with them one-on-one? Qi Wenhan replied instinctively. Then he reacted and slapped his thigh. Wonderful. How wonderful. Brother Ling, you are indeed brilliant. Not really brilliant. I saw that the other party's morale was high from the start, and it was not a good idea to fight them head-on. So, I simply decided to show weakness. As for this, it's actually an unexpected gain. Lin Yi said with a smile. In one spurt of energy, this was the experience left behind by the ancient people. It was used to deal with the Wuma Escort Agency, this kind of armed escort team that was on steroids. It just so happened to have a miraculous restraining effect, and the psychological suggestion left behind in the process made the horse escort master waver. Even Lin Yi himself did not expect that it would have such a good anti-brainwashing effect. Hee Brother Ling, you don't have to be so humble. You must have calculated this point, which is why you made our brothers flee so pathetically. This afternoon, Songlong is going to have a headache. Strict compliance is the foundation of their escort agency's survival. Now that his subordinates are disobedient, let's see what else he can do to be arrogant. Qi Wenhan immediately felt proud and elated. They might not necessarily be disobedient. It's just that he doesn't seem to be very obedient. Lenny corrected. It was impossible for the Wu Steed escort to completely disobey Wu Zonglong's orders with this kind of strategy. Same. Qi Wenhan chuckled, then said impatiently. Then what do we do next? Do we have to go all out in one go? No, it's not the right time yet. Lenny shook his head lightly. Now it seemed that his side had a slight psychological advantage, but it was far from enough. After all, the Wu Horse Escort Agency was not so easy to deal with. If they were to apply pressure now, it was very likely that they would retaliate and cause the opposite effect. All right. Although Qi Wenhan's heart was itching, since he had given Lenny full authority, he naturally would not say anything. Whatever Lenny said he would do. Bastards. A bunch of bastards. Did my words go in one ear and out the other? Do you want to go back and receive punishment? Hurry up and kill one of them. Wu Zonglong was still in a rage. When the 5 Wu Horse Escort Agency heard the words punishment, they instantly shivered and did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent. They hurriedly shook off the distracting thoughts in their minds and began to exert their strength again. They surrounded one of the Heaven's Equal escorts in a corner. It was still that Golden Dan late-stage escort. At the same time, the 4 Heaven's Equal escorts who had been emptied all turned their attention to the strongest Golden Dan late-stage escort. The situation was exactly the same as before. Kill him! Kill him! Wu Zonglong was afraid that there would be another mishap, so he yelled and urged. While he was urging them, the other 4 Heaven's Equal escort masters had already prepared their powerful martial techniques. The arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, and at this critical moment, the group of Wu Horse escort masters, especially the Golden Core Paragon escort master, hesitated for a moment. However, under the threat of Wu Zonglong, they had no choice but to act. You can come down now, Lenny suddenly ordered. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, when the Wu Horse Escort Agency launched their attacks, the trapped Heaven's Equal escorts actually jumped down from the arena at the last moment, causing all their attacks to miss. At the same time, it was the Golden Dan late-stage escort from the Wu Horse Escort Agency who received the full force of the other 4 Heaven's Equal escorts' attacks. While he was hesitating, all of his vital points were hit, and he died on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the entire crowd fell silent. Wu Zonglong's face became extremely ugly, as black as the bottom of a pot. Because the Heaven's Equal escorts jumped down from the arena, they lost a late-stage Golden Dan late-stage escort. On the other hand, the Wu Horse Escort Agency lost a Golden Dan late-stage escort. It was a classic strategy, but everyone could see that the Wu Horse Escort Agency had suffered a great loss this time. After a long period of attrition, the morale of the Middle Horse Escort on the field had already been worn down. Otherwise, if their morale was still high, they would not have wavered just now, nor would they have hesitated and delayed things. Now they had suffered such a great loss, especially when they were toyed with by their opponents. Their morale had fallen to rock bottom, and they were at a loss for what to do. Feign weakness to the enemy, then retreat when the enemy advances. Wear down the morale, and defeat the enemy with one strike. Brother Ling, you are a master of the art of war. Qi Wenhan's eyes lit up. He was a knowledgeable person, which was why he could see the situation so clearly. If it had been anyone else, they would have thought it was amazing. They would have thought that the Heaven's Equal escorts were obviously in a sorry state. So how did they suddenly gain the upper hand? Could it be that young hero Ling's strategy from the very beginning was to use this strategy? Steward Song, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. That's right. Against a tough opponent like the Wu Horse Escort Agency, using brute force would be too damaging. Using this kind of strategy, which is extremely advantageous, can break their morale. Lenny nodded and said. Chapter 44-55. If not for the previous incident, they would have done so already. However, now that it had happened, the 4 horse escort masters left on the field suffered an even greater blow. However, after saying that, his thoughts drifted to the faraway North Africa. At that time, fighting in the jungle required the most tactics. And the tactics that Lenny used were just some of the tactics that he had used too many times. It was just that no one used them on Heaven Tier Island. Top novel. When he thought of North Africa, he could not help but think of Yuning. Was she doing well in the secular world? Was everyone else doing well? Has he received my letter? Shaking his head, he threw away these sorrowful thoughts, because the competition was still ongoing. To be able to receive the help of young hero Ling is the greatest fortune that the equal of Heaven's escort agency has accumulated over several lifetimes. It is also the fortune of the young master's family. Steward Song sighed as he glanced at Qi Wenhan meaningfully. Qi Wenhan embarrassedly scratched his head. In comparison, the performance of his young master was far too immature. It couldn't be said that he was weak, but it could be said that Ling Yi was a freak. He was strong in all aspects, and ordinary people couldn't compare to him. What are you panicking for? You still have 4 people, and the opponent only has 4 people. What is there to panic about? Let's take them down in one go. Wu Zonglong was unwilling to accept his fate, and continued to shout from below the stage. He was still trying to raise the morale of his team, and was still thinking of turning the tables. However, in the eyes of the audience, this scene only caused them to mock him. Anyone with eyes could see that the horse escort company had already lost. At this time it was useless to be so stubborn. 4 against 4 is not bad. But the other side has 1 Jindan peak, 2 peak stage Jindan realm martial artists, and 1 peak stage Jindan realm martial artist. While your Noon Horse Escort Agency has 1 peak stage Jindan realm martial artist, and 3 peak stage Jindan realm martial artists. If their morale was as high as before, then they might be able to create a miracle. However, the problem was that their morale had fallen to the freezing point. What could they use to fight against the opponent? The development of this competition was not surprising. Just as everyone had expected, the Noon Horse Escort Agency had lost all of its sharpness. It was completely suppressed by the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. Even after the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the 4 escorts of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency were still unscathed. On the other hand, the menacing Noon Horse Escort Agency had lost another 2 escorts. In the end, they had to pay a heavy price of 3 lives. This was the end of the challenge. Without losing a single soldier, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency managed to have the last laugh despite the farce that started the operation. This scene caused everyone's eyes to pop out of their sockets, and they could not help but comment on it. Even a traditional wealthy organization like the 4 Seas Escort Agency might not be able to completely destroy the Noon Horse Escort Agency, which was known for its toughness and blood. At the very least, it was impossible for them to do so without losing a single soldier. However, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency had done it. This was a duel. Rather than saying it was a difference in strength, it was better to say it was a complete and utter suppression of intelligence. From the beginning to the end, Wu Zonglong had been toyed with by Lin Yi. He did not have the slightest ability to resist. However, because of this, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was even more favored by the Chambers of Commerce. Not only did the people in charge of the Chambers of Commerce not look down on the Heaven's Equal Escort for running away, they all nodded their heads in approval. After all, the responsibility of an escort was to be a bodyguard. It was not to fight with brute force. No matter what methods were used, as long as one managed to protect the goods, they would be considered a good escort. On the other hand, if one fought with brute force and lost the goods, what was the point of that? To put it nicely, it was bravery, but in reality, it was like a tiger. It was not a life or death grudge. An escort's job was to be a bodyguard. Everything else was secondary. On the scoreboard, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency had risen by 100 points, reaching an astonishing 770 points. Not only had the gap not shrunk, but it had also widened. On the other hand, the Noon Horse Escort Agency, which had initiated the challenge, was left with a pitiful 60 points after losing 100 points. Not only was it at the bottom of all the escort agencies, but it was also facing the awkward situation of being eliminated if it lost another match. Wu Zonglong's mood was so gloomy that he could die. He had been feared by all the escort agencies, but now, he was about to follow in the footsteps of the 10,000 Miles Escort Agency. However, he had brought this upon himself. who asked him to challenge the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Head Escort Agency. Are we still going to challenge the Heavens Equal Escort Agency? The assistant who had been ordered to make preparations asked cautiously. Slap. Wu Zonglong slapped the assistant so hard that he fell to the ground. He shouted hysterically, "Challenge my ass. Don't tell me that we haven't lost badly enough? Do you really want to be eliminated?" Although he had flown into a rage out of humiliation, Wu Zonglong did not lose his rationality. Right now, the most important thing for him was to ensure that he would not be eliminated, not to chase after the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Otherwise, if they lost another match and were really eliminated, his Noon Horse Escort Agency would become as weak as the 10,000 Miles Escort Agency. They would no longer be able to receive any decent large orders. From then on, they would have to rely on the sea breeze to pass their days. The previous example was right in front of them. For a moment, the escort agencies that had been itching to give it a try and had the same idea as the Noon Horse Escort Agency. For example, the Yongxing Escort Agency, which was about as strong as the Noon Horse Escort Agency, had originally wanted to use the Heavens Equal Escort Agency as a stepping stone to reach the top in one step. However, they were now hesitating again. It was true that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency had not displayed its truly overwhelming strength in this match. It was far from enough to make people feel fear and despair. However, if it was any other escort agency that had taken the challenge, they could not guarantee that they would perform better than the Noon Horse Escort Agency. What if they ended up in the same situation? Lenny smiled faintly when he saw that the people in charge of the escort agencies had fallen into a state of hesitation and struggle. This effect was actually just right. He could easily obtain points without scaring the other agencies and completely cut off their thoughts of reaching the top in one step. Otherwise, if they were to be so frightened that no agency dared to take the initiative to challenge them, it would be a different kind of loss. After all, in the 5th round of the Escort Agency Championship, each agency was only given the right to challenge and the right to be challenged twice. As for whether they wanted to challenge or use up all these opportunities, it was up to each agency to decide. There were no mandatory rules in the championship. For example, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency had the right to initiate a challenge twice. Of course, it was up to them to decide. However, whether or not they could use the remaining right to be challenged depended on whether or not the other escort agencies would continue to challenge them. If they were all scared off, then the right to be challenged this time would just be for show. Naturally, it would be useless. This problem was not so obvious for the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. After all, it was just a new force to be reckoned with. Its strength had yet to be truly ingrained in people's hearts. Chapter 4456. However, for traditional aristocrats like the Four Seas Escort Agency and the Divine Wind Escort Agency, their accumulated prestige was an obvious disadvantage at this time. They were more likely to fight among themselves. As for the other escort agencies, they did not dare to challenge them at all. Otherwise, they would be asking for trouble and giving away points for no reason. The entire conference fell into a rare silence. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, an escort agency stepped forward to challenge again. However, the challenger was not the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, but the weakest agencies that were ranked at the bottom in terms of strength and ranking. The ready-made points that were guaranteed to win were what most escort agencies loved the most. The 5 consecutive matches were all competitions that were aimed at grabbing points while they were down. There was no suspense to speak of. Compared to the match between the Heavens Equal Escort Agency and the Noon Horse Escort Agency, it was really boring. The atmosphere in the entire Demon Cold Square was quite dull. Everyone was even beginning to feel sleepy. At this time, another good show finally came on stage. The Black Eagle Agency, which was ranked 6th on the scoreboard, challenged the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Upon hearing these two names, everyone's spirits rose. These two organizations were no ordinary organizations. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency, which was currently in the limelight, did not need to be mentioned. However, the Black Eagle Escort Agency was no ordinary organization either. The Black Eagle Agency? Lenny did not know much about this escort agency. He was surprised by this challenge. He thought that the Four Seas Escort Agency would not be able to hold back. After all, if it wanted to quickly gain points, directly challenging the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was the most cost-effective choice. As long as it won, it would be able to gain 200 points in one go. Otherwise, even if it won 4 matches in a row, it might not be able to gain so many points unless the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency suffered consecutive defeats. Unfortunately, the probability of this happening was not high. This is troublesome. Chi Wen-han, who was standing at the side, frowned. Seeing that Lenny was still confused, he smiled bitterly and explained, "The strength of this escort agency is far beyond the Noon Horse Escort Agency. Its strength is definitely not to be underestimated. Brother Ling, do you know about the Yuantong Escort Agency? I've heard a little about it. It's said that the original 5 major escort agencies split up during the last South Continent Escort Agency Festival. That's why their position fell to our agency." Lenny nodded. He had heard about this from other escorts. This Black Hawk Escort Agency is actually the reorganized Far Pass Escort Agency. I heard that they've been recruiting for the past few years, and their strength is even stronger than the original Far Pass Escort Agency. And this time, they even publicly shouted out a slogan, saying that they want to take back their position as one of the 5 major escort agencies from our hands. Chi Wen-han couldn't help but feel a little nervous. If it was the afternoon darts, even if they had to pay a heavy price, they would still be able to defeat their opponents. However, this Black Eagle Escort Agency that came with such a menacing aura, if they were to really fight, their strength would probably be above their own. This was definitely a strong enemy. Hehe, if that's the case, you've come with ill intentions. It was only then that Lenny understood. It made sense for the Black Eagle Escort Agency to challenge his Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. They wanted to take back their position as one of the top 5 escort agencies. Naturally, he would target the 5 major escort agencies. Compared to the other 4 traditional wealthy families, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was still in the limelight, but it was much weaker. Moreover, it was once the Yuantong Escort Agency. It had been snatched away by the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. Therefore, this was a typical revenge. Brother Ling, what should we do now? Chi Wen-han saw that Lenny didn't seem to care. He could not help but ask nervously, "What else can we do? I'll fight with all my strength. I'll have to fight this kind of tough battle sooner or later. It's not a bad thing. If we do well in this battle, our equals Heaven's Escort Agency's spirit, Chi, and spirit will rise by leaps and bounds. That is the aura that a wealthy and powerful family should have." Lenny glanced at him before ordering the escorts to line up and prepare for the selection of soldiers. Brother Ling is right, I lost my composure. Only then did Chi Wen-han react. As the young master, being afraid before the battle had even begun would greatly affect the morale of his men. While he was secretly embarrassed, he hurriedly patted his chest and said, "Brother Ling, this is going to be a tough battle. I'm afraid it will be difficult to use tricks like before. Why don't I personally take the lead?" An arena battle of life and death was ultimately a battle of brute strength. Not every battle could be like the one against the Noon Horse Escort Agency, where one could rely on intelligence to crush the opponent. "Brother Chi, are you sure?" This time, Lenny did not directly stop him. In his opinion, the upcoming battle against the Black Eagle Escort Agency might very well be a battle that would transform the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. As the young master, if Chi Wen-han were to personally take the field, not only would he be powerful, but he would also be able to greatly boost the morale of his men, greatly increasing their chances of winning. Of course. Chi Wen-han nodded solemnly and grinned. "Brother Ling, I'll leave the command to you. As for the vanguard, just leave it to me." Considering the upcoming challenge of the head of the escort agency, they had to conserve their strength. Therefore, Chi Wen-han would definitely not let Lenny join them. Therefore, this time, he would be leading the team himself. This was already the strongest formation that the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency could muster. That's good. This battle concerns the future of the entire escort agency. Since Brother Chi is personally taking the field, this battle must be won. Also, Brother Chi, you must take care of your own safety. If anything happens to you, even if we win this battle in the end, it will not be worth it, Linny reminded him. Brother Ling, do not worry. I know what I'm doing. Chi Wenhan nodded solemnly. Good. Linny immediately began to select his team members. This battle was of utmost importance. There was no room for mistakes. Therefore, he did not have any thoughts of conserving his strength. He immediately brought out the strongest formation he had, including Chi Wenhan, who was at the Golden Essence level. There were a total of 3 Golden Essence level experts at the Golden Essence level, and 2 experts at the peak of the late Golden Essence level. Of course, if they wanted to ensure that their strength was the strongest on paper, they could actually add another Golden Essence level expert. However, this person had dared to fight the Noon Horse Escort Agency. Although he was not injured, he had expended a lot of true chi. He would not be able to recover in a short period of time. Therefore, there was no point in forcing him to fight now. With such a strong formation, even if they were to face a prestigious escort agency like the Four Seas Escort Agency, they would still be able to put up a fight. If they were to face the Noon Horse Escort Agency, this formation would be able to crush them directly. There was no need for them to scheme. Seeing the list of participating escorts that Steward Song had handed over, Chi Mingyuan, who was sitting among the judges, was instantly stunned. Nonsense! Chi Mingyuan glared and immediately slammed the table, wanting to step off the stage to stop this. Although in order to ensure the fairness of the competition as a judge, he was not allowed to step off the stage without permission, he could not care less now. After all, this was his only son, who he had high hopes for. Chapter 4457. If he lost the competition, he could still make a comeback. But if something happened to Chi Wenhan, who would he cry to? He was the only successor of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. If even the successor died, what future would the agency have? Head Escort Agency, we can't always protect our young eagle under our wings. There will come a day when it will experience a storm. I think we should let Wenhan have a try. This is a rare opportunity. Housekeeper Song reached out to stop him. Old Song, why are you? Chi Mingyuan frowned and sighed. I understand this, but this kind of thing has to be done step by step. We can't put ourselves in such a dangerous situation all of a sudden, right? The Black Eagle Agency is not easy to deal with. Chief Escort, in my opinion, while this battle is dangerous, nothing will happen to Wenhan. After all, young hero Ling is here. And you've also seen his ability to command on the spot. There won't be any problems. Butler Song, on the other hand, looked very confident. This is true. Chi Mingyuan hesitated. Ling Yi's presence gave him a reassurance. Even if he did not participate in the battle himself, just commanding on the spot should be enough to ensure Chi Wenhan's safety. In the end, he could only nod and say, the world still belongs to the young. Old Song, we are all old. That's right. Our Heavens Equal Escort Agency is about to enter a new chapter. We have a bright future. Housekeeper Song nodded. Well said. A bright future. Chi Mingyuan's eyes flashed. He finally made up his mind and announced the name list of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's participating escorts. Seeing that the first name on the list was the young master of the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, Chi Wenhan, the crowd was in an uproar. After all the previous miraculous performances, especially when they defeated the aggressive Noon Horse Escort Agency without losing a single soldier, no one dared to look down on the Heavens Equal Escort Agency anymore. After all, they were not idiots. Even if the Heavens Equal Escort Agency did not display overwhelming strength, they had a solid record in front of them. They had no choice but to accept it. Now that they saw Chi Wenhan personally leading the team, the crowd did not look down on them as much as Linny had expected. Instead, they were all in high spirits. Facing a strong opponent like the Black Eagle Agency, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was finally going all out. Chi Wenhan. At this moment, in the Black Hawk Escort Agency's camp, there was a middle-aged man in a black coat with an eye-catching knife scar on his face. Seeing this, he could not help but be slightly taken aback. This person was the chief escort of the Black Hawk Escort Agency, Zhao Shanning. 5 years ago, the Yuantong Escort Agency fell apart overnight. In just a year, Zhao Shanning, who was originally just an ordinary escort leader of the Yuantong Escort Agency, took advantage of the chaos and rose to power. Not only did he successfully swallow up the various forces left behind by the Yuantong Escort Agency, but he also reformed the Black Eagle Escort Agency. After 3 years of development and expansion, his current strength was far greater than before. He was a formidable and ambitious character. Even the young master has been forced to come out. This shows that the equal of Heaven Escort Agency's strength is only SOSO. Although they were lucky enough to become one of the top 5 escort agencies last time. It's a pity that a nouveau riche will always be a nouveau riche. They'll never be able to make a name for themselves, one of the escorts beside him said with a pout. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency has been one of the top 5 escort agencies for 5 years. In your eyes, it's just a nouveau riche. Then what is our Black Eagle Escort Agency? Zhao Shanning glanced at him. The escort leader was at a loss for words. Although his agency had been reformed from the Yuantong Escort Agency, strictly speaking, it was still an escort agency that had only been established for a few years. If he insisted on feeling superior to the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, he would be deceiving himself and others. The biggest difference between a rich and a nouveau riche is not in strength, but in the foundation and temperament. This Heavens Equal Escort Agency has only been established for a short 5 years, but it already has the temperament of a rich and powerful family. They're able to take things in at will, strategize against their enemies, and fight to the death. They're really not simple. Zhao Shanning exclaimed. For the past few years, he had been wholeheartedly trying to build the temperament of a rich and powerful family. Perhaps in the eyes of others, the Black Eagle Escort Agency was strong enough, but in his eyes, it was far from enough. Especially now that he had seen the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, the gap between them was even more obvious. Head Escort, since the Heavens Equal Escort Agency is stronger than expected, should we proceed with the battle as planned? The escort leader who was in charge of directing the battle asked. No, this time, I will personally direct the battle. If our Black Eagle Escort Agency wants to rise, we must defeat the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. We must win this battle, not lose. Zhao Shanning's aura grew cold. The current Heavens Equal Escort Agency had indeed earned his respect. However, respect was respect, and he could not go easy on them. In fact, the more this was so, the more he wanted to defeat them. An opponent like this deserved to be personally commanded by Zhao Shanning. While Zhao Shanning was observing the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, Lin Yi, Qi Wenhan, and the others were also carefully observing the Black Eagle Escort Agency. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. That person is the head escort of the Black Eagle Escort Agency? Lin Yi looked Zhao Shanning up and down. Whether it was against the Noon Horse Escort Agency or the Yongxing Escort Agency in the first round of the battle, he had only observed the participating escorts. He had never paid attention to the person commanding the battle. This time, however, was an exception. That's right. This person's name is Zhao Shanning. My father has a very high opinion of him, even higher than boundless seas. He is an ambitious and ruthless character, Qi Wenhan said, nodding cautiously. He does seem to be something else. Lin Yi nodded. After experiencing so many ups and downs, he had seen all sorts of people. He had quite a bit of experience when it came to reading people's faces. As the saying went, one's face was born from one's heart. This was not just a person's appearance, but also a person's temperament and demeanor. This Zhao Shanning, on the other hand, gave off an extraordinary aura. He was a classic example of an ambitious and ruthless character. As the two of them spoke, the participating escorts of the Dark Eagle Escort Agency, under the urging of the referee, had already left the arena. The 5 of them lined up in a row and stood on the arena, causing the entire audience to exclaim in surprise. The 5 participating escorts were all experts at the Golden Core Perfection stage. How generous! Even Qi Wenhan could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The rules stated that only Golden Core experts could participate in the South Continent's Escort Agency Grand Meet. Sending 5 Golden Core experts at the Golden Core Perfection stage at once was already a dream lineup. In the past, only the overlords of escort agencies like the Four Seas Escort Agency could deploy such a lineup. Who would have thought that the Black Eagle Escort Agency would be so powerful? Chapter 4458. Interesting. Lin Yi's eyes brightened. Although he was only in charge of giving instructions and not personally going into battle, the thrill of encountering such a strong opponent made him unconsciously excited. Brother Ling, how do we fight? Qi Wenhan asked. The other 4 participating escorts also looked at Lin Yi expectantly. They were more or less nervous. After all, they were facing 5 Golden Core consummation experts. If they fought them head-on, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Therefore, the key to winning this battle was still Lin Yi's on-the-spot instructions. Everyone, don't be nervous. In this battle, our strength is actually not weaker than our opponents. Lin Yi smiled and comforted them. He then analyzed. Although our opponents have 5 Golden Core consummation experts, we have Brother Qi on our side, so there is nothing to be afraid of. Brother Qi's strength is well known throughout the entire Verdant Arc territorial waters. Ordinary Golden Core consummation experts are probably just so in Brother Qi's eyes? Hee, Brother Ling is too kind. Qi Wenhan pinched his nose and did not deny it. Although his strength was not as abnormal as Lin Yi's, who could beat up an early Yuanying expert, he was still an existence that could not be underestimated. He was known as the small invincible Golden Core in the Verdant Arc territorial waters. Yes, with young master here we can fight. The other 4 participating escorts immediately relaxed quite a bit. Under normal circumstances, Qi Wenhan would be able to restrain 2 Golden Core Paragon experts. In this way, when they fought later, their side would not necessarily be at a disadvantage. So there is no need to be nervous. Although our opponents are strong, as long as we treat them calmly, our chances of winning are still very high. Lin Yi smiled. After letting everyone relax, he said seriously, if nothing unexpected happens, when the battle starts, I am afraid that the opponents will focus on attacking Brother Qi. Brother Qi, you must be mentally prepared for this. Yes, I know. To catch the bandits, first catch the ringleader. Qi Wenhan replied in a low voice. He was the strongest person in the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency. At the same time, he was also the most obvious breakthrough point. If something happened to him, the young master, then everything would be over. Then we have to be careful and protect the young master carefully. This is to prevent our opponents from succeeding in their schemes. The 4 participating escorts looked at each other. Although Qi Wenhan was strong, this was an escort agency competition, not a one-on-one duel. The situation could change in an instant, and if his opponents seized the opportunity to gang up on him, even Qi Wenhan would not be able to withstand it. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi shook his head repeatedly. If you really think that way, then we have lost. And he will definitely lose. Everyone including Qi Wenhan was stunned. Just a moment ago, he had said that his chances of winning were very high. How did it become certain defeat in the blink of an eye? Brother Qi's presence is a double-edged sword for both sides. The longer he stays on the field, the easier it is for him to get into an accident. For the Black Eagle Escort Agency, the most they can do is to lose this match. They can afford to lose, but we can't. Lin Yi's gaze slowly swept across everyone's faces. So, in order to prevent any accidents, we must finish this battle quickly. End the battle quickly? Everyone's eyelids twitched as they hurriedly asked. How do you mean end the battle quickly? Their opponents were not weaklings, but 5 Golden Core perfected experts. With their strength, it would be a blessing from the heavens if they could win this battle of life and death. How could they end the battle quickly? Unless, of course, it was a risky move. You must remember every word I say. Whether or not we can have the last laugh in this battle, whether or not we can let you, especially Brother Qi, escape unscathed, depends on whether or not you can do it. Lin Yi's expression turned serious for once, because everyone was right. From a certain perspective, This strategy was indeed a risky one. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the battle between the Black Eagle Escort Agency and the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency finally began with the announcement of the referee. The moment the incense was lit, the 5 Golden Core perfected experts of the Black Eagle Escort Agency charged towards their opponents like ferocious tigers released from their cages. They did not seem to have any intricate formation, but their pace was surprisingly consistent. Even their breathing was strictly synchronized. The result of this was that the 5 people's powerful auras completely fused into one, forming a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas, covering the sky and covering the earth as it pressed down on Qi Wenhan and the others. Not simple indeed. Ling Yi's eyes brightened. Synchronizing one's breath did not seem difficult, but in reality, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was even more difficult after one's strength had reached the Golden Core perfected level. Whether it was fighting or doing other things, everyone had their own familiar rhythm. The more powerful one was, the more obvious this rhythm would be. Once one broke away from their own rhythm, everything would become difficult. Originally, one's strength might be 10%, but in the end, they might only be able to use 60 to 70%, or even less. In all kinds of competitions in the secular world, there were always people who brought their opponents into their own rhythm, and won in the end. Cases of the weak defeating the strong were not uncommon. In fact, this was the principle. Under such circumstances, to make 5 Golden Core perfected experts synchronize one's breath, the difficulty was obvious. Lin Yi did not believe that his opponents would deliberately sacrifice part of their strength to achieve this. Since his opponents dared to do this, there was only one possibility. The rhythm of these 5 Golden Core perfected experts was naturally synchronized. At least, the difference between them was negligible. Fight! In the face of his opponent's mountain-like pressure, Qi Wenhan did not want to be outdone. After a cold shout, the 4 Heaven's Equal escorts beside him quickly formed an arrow formation, the arrowheads pointing straight at their opponents. What a strong spirit! Zhao Shanning could not help but praise. The Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was indeed one of the 5 major escort agencies. Although it had only been a short time, the quality of these escorts was not the least bit inferior to the other 5 agencies. In particular, the arrow formation's spirit was threatening. It was obvious that they had trained a lot. However, what made Zhao Shanning slightly surprised was that among the 5 opponents, the strongest was undoubtedly Qi Wenhan. Logically speaking, he, the strongest person, should be the spearhead of the formation. Only by doing so would he be able to maximize the power of the arrow formation. However, the current situation was that not only was Qi Wenhan not the spearhead, he faintly felt that he was disconnected from the rest of the group. What was going on? Could it be that this young master did not usually train with the escorts, so he was not used to the arrow formation? This is a good opportunity. Cut them in half and separate them. The opportunity was fleeting. Zhao Shanning did not have much time to hesitate, and immediately gave the order. Chapter 4459. On the stage, the 5 Black Eagle escort masters roared angrily and exerted their strength. Instead of pressing forward, they changed their formation and moved in a straight line, instantly separating Qi Wenhan and the other 4. Bang! This time, Qi Wenhan was immediately isolated, completely drifting away from his own vanguard formation. The audience gasped in shock. Not to mention those who knew the ropes. Even the layman who just wanted to watch the show knew that the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was in a bad situation. Qi Wenhan, the young master, was the soul of the agency. He had to protect him closely, but in the blink of an eye, he had been isolated. They were outnumbered, and the initiative had completely fallen into the hands of their opponents. This way, they could do whatever they wanted, and the other 4 from the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency could not even save them. How could this be? Qi Mingyuan's heart tightened when he saw this scene. He took 2 steps back from the judge's seat. If Qi Wenhan really died on the stage, how could he live? Head escort, please wait. In my opinion, this matter is not so simple. Wenhan should not be so brainless. Furthermore, young hero Ling is giving commands on the spot. Housekeeper Song, who had been guarding the area, quickly stopped him. Old Song, what you mean is? Qi Mingyuan immediately stopped in his tracks. He was confused because of his concern, but now that Housekeeper Song had reminded him, he immediately understood. With Ling Yi and Qi Wenhan's abilities, even if they were not a match for the Black Eagle Escort Agency, they should not be in such a passive position. Let's continue watching. I believe they will not disappoint you. Housekeeper Song nodded and did not say anything else. I hope so. Qi Mingyuan felt a little more at ease, but he was still a little worried. What were young Hero Ling and his son up to? Please don't let anything go wrong. At this moment on the stage, the situation was clear. Qi Wenhan was separated by his opponents. If he wanted to form a coordination with the other four, he would have to go through the encirclement of the 5 Golden Elixir Realm experts. This was practically 1 against 5. Even if Qi Wenhan was much stronger than the average Golden Elixir Realm expert, it was impossible for him to do such an exaggerated thing. At most, he could fight 1 against 2, and it was uncertain whether he could win in the end. If it was 1 against 5, it was practically asking for death. Capture the ringleader. Zhao Shanning, who was below the stage, hurriedly gave the order. He had been thinking about how to deal with Qi Wenhan since the beginning. Now that such a great opportunity had been placed in front of him, there was no reason for him to hesitate. After all, he had no friendship with the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency to begin with. Furthermore, this was not the time to be soft-hearted. While you're down, I'll take your life. The 5 experts of the Peak of Gold Core Realm of the Black Eagle Escort Agency immediately formed a formation and prepared to take advantage of the situation to surround and kill Qi Wenhan. With their strength and this kind of ready-made opportunity, they did not need to waste their time at all. They only needed a moment to solve the problem. However, before they could do anything, on the other side, Qi Wenhan was already prepared. In an instant, he exploded with an extremely astonishing speed, retreating to the empty space behind him. At the same time, the other 4 Heavens Equal escorts, who had formed an arrow formation, were also stunned. Instead, he took the initiative and aggressively charged towards one of the Black Eagle bodyguards. Even Zhao Shanning jumped in fright. His heart skipped a beat. The 2 sides had reacted in unison. Moreover, it was so fast. How was it possible that he was caught off guard? It was obvious that he had been accumulating power for a long time. That meant they were prepared for this. Could it be that they did this on purpose from the beginning? Zhao Shanning subconsciously glanced at Lin Yi in the distance. He knew that the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's previous victories were all thanks to this person. In the previous round, it was also this person who was able to toy with the Noon Horse Escort Agency in the palm of his hand. Who knew what this person was planning this time? The reason why Zhao Shanning was able to achieve what he had today was not because he was arrogant and conceited. He was able to clearly weigh the weight of every person he had met. In his eyes, Lin Yi was undoubtedly an unfathomable person. Zhao Shanning didn't dare let his guard down in the slightest, afraid of falling into Lin Yi's trap. Fortunately, the 5 escorts he'd sent out were all cautious men. Even when they'd wanted to surround and kill Qi Wenhan, they hadn't messed up their formation. Otherwise, if they'd been ambushed by 4 Heavens Equal escorts, one of them would have died on the spot. Come on, the gamble has already begun. Let's see if you're prepared to bet on big or small. Lin Yi looked at Zhao Shanning from afar and smiled faintly. On one side was Qi Wenhan, who was alone, and on the other side were the 4 Heavens Equal escorts in the arrow formation. Zhao Shanning had to make a choice between the 2. This was the gamble that Lin Yi had set out. It was supposed to be a very simple matter, but because Qi Wenhan had escaped the encirclement, they had lost the opportunity to break through the situation. The situation had suddenly become complicated, and Zhao Shanning could not help but frown. First of all, the 4 Heavens Equal escorts who had formed the arrow formation could not be left unguarded. The arrow formation was originally a formation with outstanding lethality. With the strength of these 4 people, if they were left alone, it would not be difficult for them to kill an expert in the Golden Elixir Great Perfection in an instant. Secondly, on the other side, Qi Wenhan could not be left unguarded. Zhao Shanning could see that this person's strength was much stronger than an ordinary expert of golden core consummation. If he allowed him to do as he pleased, the consequences would be unimaginable. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't let go of either side. Zhao Shanning could only choose to split his forces into two. One would deal with the arrow formation, and the other would deal with Qi Wenhan. As for how many people he would split up, he had to carefully consider it. On Qi Wenhan's side, it was obviously impossible to send only one person. If it was a one-on-one fight, he might be killed in minutes. Therefore, he needed at least two people. On the other side, facing the arrow formation of the four heavens equal escorts, Zhao Shanning did not dare to underestimate them. If there were less than 3 people, he might suffer a great loss. Vulture Falcon deal with Qi Wenhan. The other 3 hold off the other 4. Zhao Shanning ordered in a low voice. He was still eyeing the isolated Qi Wenhan like a tiger watching its prey. He was itching to make a move and swallow him up. However, at the same time, he was afraid of falling into Lin Yi's trap. So he did not dare to send more people to deal with Qi Wenhan. If the other party's killing move was hidden in the arrow formation of the 4, sending only 2 people to guard would not be sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth. 2 people to deal with Qi Wenhan, and 3 people to deal with the arrow formation. This was the safest method in Zhao Shanning's eyes. Chapter 4460. On the other side, Lin Yi smiled as he watched the scene unfold. Bet on big, bet on small, and leave after you've made up your mind. Everyone in the audience was filled with interest as they raised their heads to look at the situation in the arena. Currently, it was still unclear who had the upper hand and who had the lower hand, but the scene was clear. The huge arena had unknowingly been divided into 2 halves. On one side, it was Qi Wenhan against 2, and on the other side, it was the Vanguard formation against 4 against 3. After so many South Continent Escort Agency grand meetings, they had seen all kinds of escort agency duels, and they had seen all kinds of tragic battles. But this was the first time they had seen such a strange situation. Zhao Shanning suddenly clenched his fists. Although it was still a stalemate, and no matter how he looked at it, there was a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart, and chills ran down his spine. This feeling was like falling into a swamp. At first, it was not dangerous, but as it sank deeper and deeper, it would be too late to regret it when it was discovered. Zhao Shanning's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he was about to change his strategy when the situation suddenly changed. Qi Wenhan was still fighting 1 against 2, but on the other side, both sides had one person seriously injured and rolled off the arena. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency sacrificed a peak Golden Elixir Realm late stage, but succeeded in exchanging the opponent's Golden Elixir Realm Great Attainment. This situation made everyone's eyelids twitch. Exchange, another exchange. Previously, they had gained the upper hand in the exchange of chess pieces, which had destroyed the last bit of the Horse Escort Agency's spirit, and allowed them to crush their opponent and achieve a complete victory. Now the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was playing the same trick again, but this time, their opponent was the Black Eagle Agency. That's great. Young Hero Ling is really amazing. In order to create this opportunity to exchange, you have really put in a lot of effort. Qi Mingyuan saw the situation and immediately felt relieved and praised Ling Xian. Previously, he was still confused, but now that things had developed to this point, if he still could not see Lin Yi's plan, then he would not be able to sit in this position today. Although the strategy of exchanging pieces was simple, to achieve this, especially at the same time of exchanging pieces, it required real skills. After all, people were not fools. No one would be stupid enough to exchange an expert in the great perfection of the Gold Core Realm for an expert in the peak of the Gold Core Realm late stage. Heavens Equal Escort Agency was only able to do this because of Lin Yi's formation and direction. If it wasn't for the arrow formation, successfully creating a situation where they had the advantage of numbers meant that they wouldn't have the opportunity to exchange pieces. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the situation. Not bad. Not only did young Hero Ling set up a brilliant trap, But Wen Han's performance was also commendable. His contributions cannot go unnoticed. Butler Song nodded repeatedly. Although the breakthrough point of this exchange was the four-man arrow formation, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the most crucial source of all this was Wen Han. If he had not successfully held back the two Golden Core Paragon experts, how could the other four people of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency have the advantage in numbers? Especially when Wen Han was facing two Golden Core Paragon experts. He was able to remain calm from beginning to end. With ease, people could not help but sigh. This young master of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency was indeed not an ordinary person. He was able to easily take on two people at the same realm. At least, ordinary people would definitely not be able to do this. Let him go 1v2, even though it seems a bit risky. Although it seems risky, it's still within this fellow's ability. As long as the other party doesn't act recklessly, there shouldn't be any danger. Qi Mingyuan nodded. He was no longer worried and nervous. Instead, he became more spirited. If this continued, the possibility of taking down the Black Eagle Agency was at least 60%, maybe even higher. Once they succeeded, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency would be the first to take down one of the top 5 escort agencies. This was enough to give the entire escort agency a shot of adrenaline. At the same time, it would let everyone know that the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency was not an undeserved reputation. It was not a super dark horse that had gotten lucky. It was truly capable of becoming the overlord of the escort agencies. Oh no! In contrast, Zhao Shanying's mood was extremely heavy. In the eyes of the onlookers, the Black Eagle Agency had suffered a loss this time. However, there were still 4 people left in the arena. The Equal of Heaven Escort Agency had 3 Golden Core Paragon experts and 1 Peak Late Golden Core expert. The Black Eagle Agency, on the other hand, had 4 Golden Core Paragon experts. In terms of strength, they still had the upper hand. Even though this advantage was not great, it was enough to tip the scales of victory in the Black Eagle Agency's favor. At the very least, they would not be at a disadvantage. However, Zhao Shanying was not as shallow as the onlookers. He was not looking at the gains and losses of one city or one place. Instead, he was looking at the overall direction of the situation. It was obvious that after this exchange, the situation was already on the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency's side. On Wen Han's side, there were 2 Golden Core Paragon experts working together to besiege him. Even if they could not take him down in a short time, there was no need to worry too much. On the other hand, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency's remaining 3 people could still form an arrow formation. On the other hand, the Black Eagle Agency's side only had 2 people left. The situation was not looking good. Previously it was 3 against 4. Basically, they were not at a disadvantage. Now that it was 2 against 3, it was obvious that they could not handle it. What Zhao Shanying was really worried about was that the other party would use the same trick again and exchange a Peak Late Golden Core expert for a Golden Core Paragon expert. If that happened, they would completely lose the advantage. This was not impossible. In fact, it was highly possible. After all, the other party still had the advantage in numbers. Moreover, they held the initiative and were fully capable of launching another exchange. When that happened, all the people left in the arena would be Golden Core Paragon experts. Both sides would be fighting 1 against 2. However, although Wen Han had the strength to fight 1 against 2, the Black Eagle Agency's side could not do the same. They might even be killed by the 2 opponents in an instant. What should I do? Zhao Shanying was extremely anxious. At the same time, he looked at Lin Yi in the distance with extreme fear. Both sides were giving commands on the spot. Zhao Shanying's side was taking 1 step at a time and looking 2 steps ahead. He was smarter than the average person. However, compared to this calm and composed young man, he was no different from a 3-year-old child. The other party was not just taking 1 step at a time and looking 2 steps ahead. Even before he made his move, he had already grasped everything in his hands. No, he had to quickly come up with a countermeasure. Zhao Shanying did not dare to wait passively. Otherwise, if the other party really attacked again, he would not even have the chance to fight back. Chapter 4461. This meant that he was prepared to attack the only remaining peak golden elixir realm expert of the Chitian escort agency. Vulture was an expert in speed. Both of them were peak golden elixir realm experts. Even if he could not defeat Qi Wenhan one-on-one, he should have no problem delaying Qi Wenhan for a short period of time. If Falcon turned around to help, it would become a 3-on-3. With a slight advantage in strength, it would not be difficult to take out the opponent's peak golden elixir realm expert first. Zhao Shanning did not want to take any risks. He only wanted to use his advantage in strength to crush his opponent directly. But now, it was obvious that he no longer had this confidence. Qi Wenhan was slightly taken aback when he sensed the other party's intentions. He immediately wanted to stop this Black Eagle escort who was known as Falcon, but the other party did not want to tangle with him at all. With Vulture's protection, unless Qi Wenhan risked his life to exchange wounds with him, there was nothing he could do to him. Qi Wenhan's eyes flashed with some hesitation and struggle. Based on his tough personality, if it were any other situation, he would definitely not let Falcon go so easily. However, this was an escort agency competition, and he was the most crucial factor in determining the outcome of the competition. Risking his life was fine at any other time, but this was the only time he could not do it. "Brother Qi, don't hold back," Lainey suddenly shouted from below the stage. Qi Wenhan stared blankly for a moment, then immediately became spirited. Without caring about anything else, he leaped up and chased after Falcon. He raised his hand and used the most powerful absolute soul palm. This was his trump card. This sudden attack left everyone speechless. The crowd was left speechless. The Black Eagle escort on the stage, especially the Falcon guards, who could feel the murderous intent behind him. "This is a good opportunity. Let's join forces and kill him." Zhao Shanning roared calmly, as if he had already expected this. It was his original intention to let Falcon help on the other side. But at the same time, there was another meaning to it: to lure the snake out of its hole. And now it seemed, this move had obviously succeeded. As soon as Zhao Shanning's voice fell, the two Black Eagle escorts closest to Qi Wenhan in the arena, Vulture and Falcon, attacked at the same time, each using their strongest martial skills to attack Qi Wenhan. Falcon, who had been locked onto by Qi Wenhan's absolute soul palm, was doing his utmost to carry out Zhao Shanning's orders. The outcome he faced was not only serious injuries, but it was very likely that he would die on the spot. However, he still chose to do so, which showed how much prestige Zhao Shanning had in their hearts. As expected, he was not a simple opponent. Lainey gave Zhao Shanning a look of appreciation. Qi Wenhan's situation on the stage was extremely dangerous. After all, he was facing an all-out counterattack from two opponents of the same level. If this continued, there was a 90% chance that he would be beaten to death. However, Lainey did not look anxious at all. He was still as calm as ever. Everyone in the audience gasped. Qi Wenhan and the other two had already finished exchanging their killing moves, and did not cancel each other out at all. Instead, all of them landed squarely on the opponent's body. Bang! Falcon was struck by Qi Wenhan's absolute soul palm. He didn't even let out a groan, as he was sent flying out of the arena, like a kite with its string cut. He didn't make a sound, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. But at the same time, Qi Wenhan didn't feel much better either. It must be known, not only did he suffer Falcon's killing move, but he also suffered an extremely fierce claw on his back. This was Vulture's sneak attack. At the same time, he suffered the killing moves of two opponents at the peak of the Jindan stage. Even if Qi Wenhan was known as the Little Invincible of the Jindan stage, he couldn't bear it. Although he wasn't directly thrown out of the arena like Falcon, he spat out a large mouthful of blood on the spot. The scene was equally shocking. "Wenhan!" In the distance, Qi Mingyuan suddenly exclaimed, his heart burning with anxiety. Just now, he thought the situation was stable, but in the blink of an eye, it had become like this. This was his only son. How could he sit still? At this moment, without needing Zhao Shanning's instructions, Vulture, who was close to Qi Wenhan on the arena, did not hesitate to attack again. "Take advantage of your illness, take your life." Qi Mingyuan was so scared that he jumped up. Chi Wenhan was already seriously injured. If he was clawed again, wouldn't that take his life? However, his opponent had underestimated Chi Wenhan's strength. After all, the little invincible of the Jindan stage was not an undeserved reputation. Even if he was seriously injured, he would not be a lamb for others to slaughter. Without waiting for Vulture's claw shadow to hit him again, Chi Wenhan didn't even turn his head. He turned his hand and unleashed the absolute soul palm that he had been preparing for a long time. He was already prepared for this. If he hadn't held back this time, Falcon, who had just been hit by him, would not have even had a full corpse left, let alone a chance to save his life. This time, Vulture was completely unprepared. In his eyes, Chi Wenhan was already a dead man. Who would have thought that this guy would still have the strength to counterattack and kill him? With two muffled sounds, Chi Wenhan and Vulture flew out at the same time, both falling off the arena. The entire arena was in an uproar. Everyone was talking about this. This young master of the Equal of Heaven escort agency was really tough. With his own strength, he had managed to take out two opponents at the peak of the Jindan stage. This was really tough. Wenhan! Chi Mingyuan immediately shouted and rushed down from the judge's stand. He looked at Chi Wenhan's face, which was as pale as paper, and he was on the verge of death. Chi Mingyuan's internal organs were on fire, and his eyes were about to bleed. Lin Yi, on the other hand, hadn't been idling around. He'd caught Chi Wenhan the moment he'd been knocked down from the arena. One hand on Chi Wenhan's back, his head lowered, not saying a word. To outsiders, Lin Yi seemed to be blaming himself and regretting Chi Wenhan's miserable fate. However, no one could have imagined that at this moment, Chi Wenhan was continuously flowing through Lin Yi's palm and into Chi Wenhan's body, rapidly healing his injuries. Healing injuries with Chi Wenhan had always been Lin Yi's forte. Now that his strength had advanced to the mid-stage of the Jindan stage, the effects of Chi Wenhan were incomparable. In the past, Chi Wenhan's near-death injuries would have taken at least half a day to heal. Now, however, it didn't even take 10 minutes. Wenhan, how are you? Chi Mingyuan no longer cared about his identity as a judge. He parted the crowd and rushed over. However, when he reached Zhou Donghuang, he was immediately stunned. Sun Yu. Father, I'm fine. Chi Wenhan's face was calm as he stood up. Behind him, Lin Yi withdrew his hand without anyone noticing. Chi Mingyuan was speechless. He couldn't say anything for a long time. Just a moment ago, he was burning with anxiety. In the end, he was almost choked to death by his own son. Chapter 4462. Just now, he looked like he was on the verge of death. How could he look completely fine now? Even Chi Mingyuan was behaving like this. Needless to say, the rest of the people present had their mouths wide open. They looked at each other and stared at Chi Wenhan speechlessly, especially Zhao Shanying of the Black Eagle Escort Agency. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Looking at his two Golden Core Realm experts lying on the ground, it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Then looking at Chi Wenhan, whom they had fought so hard to replace, there was no sign of injury at all. If this wasn't a ghost, then what was? Wenhan, are you really okay? Chi Mingyuan finally asked a proper question. He checked Chi Wenhan's injuries up and down with a face full of concern. The result shocked him. There was really no injury at all. Dad, don't worry. I'm really fine. Chi Wenhan stretched his arms and legs. He could move freely without any signs of injury. The audience was completely speechless. They looked at Chi Wenhan as if they were looking at a monster. Apart from shock, there was more shock. The strength of the Golden Core Realm experts of the Black Eagle Escort Agency was obvious to all. They were definitely not weak among those of the same level. However, Chi Wenhan had withstood the powerful killing moves of the two opponents. In particular, Vulture had taken the opportunity to scratch him twice. In the end, he had only rested for a while after being knocked out of the ring. On the other hand, it was unknown whether the two men from the Black Eagle Escort Agency were dead or alive. They were already exhaling more than they were inhaling. With such a stark contrast, anyone could see that even though they were all experts in the Golden Core Realm, they were still at the Golden Core Realm. Although they were all experts of the Golden Core Realm, The difference in strength was definitely not small. Some people even couldn't help but speculate that if this was not an arena battle, if it had been any other occasion, Qi Wenhan could have fought again in his current state. Who could stop him then? It seemed that the young master of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was simply an invincible existence in the Golden Core realm. Unbeknownst to everyone, Qi Wenhan, who was a legend in the audience, was also confused at this moment. However, he could guess that it was Lin Yi's trick, so he cooperated with him very tacitly. Qi Wenhan is actually so strong? Could it be that he was hiding his true strength in the past? Long Kiba looked at this scene. He couldn't help but frown deeply. Due to the conflict between the Dragon Boat Escort Agency and the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, he had dealt with Qi Wenhan many times. He had always known that Qi Wenhan was not weak, but he never knew that it could be this strong. That's right. This is a little troublesome. What if this fellow replaces the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency when the helmsman of the escort agency challenges him? Counselor, what do you think? Cheng Haonan was also a little worried. His target had always been Lin Yi, but he didn't expect that someone like Cheng Yaojin would suddenly appear and ruin his plan. That would be troublesome. Humph. There's nothing to worry about. However, Wu Baoliang laughed cruelly and snorted coldly. I carefully observed his martial skills just now, and the power is only average. He couldn't even kill an opponent of the same level twice in a row. How strong can he be? You're right, Counselor. Cheng Haonan and Long Kiba nodded repeatedly. Because Lin Yi didn't personally fight, they didn't observe so carefully. Hearing Wu Baoliang's words, they immediately felt relieved. The minimum requirement to be invincible at the same level was to be able to kill an opponent of the same level in one move. Qi Wenhan couldn't even do this, so it was obvious that his strength was only SO. Not only that, the two escorts from the Black Eagle Escort Agency obviously reserved some strength for defense and didn't attack with all their strength. That's why Qi Wenhan managed to escape. Otherwise, with his strength, if he was really attacked by two people in the exceptional Gold Core realm, do you think he could really survive? Wu Baoliang sneered. That's right. Both of us can't see clearly, but Counselor can see clearly. This kid is really nothing to worry about. Both of us are worrying too much. Ha ha ha. Cheng Haonan and Long Kiba looked at each other and laughed. Just as the three of them were discussing, the situation in the arena had become completely clear. After Qi Wenhan successfully exchanged 1 for 2, it was 3 against 2. The Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's advantage was obvious. Under these circumstances, even without Lin Yi's guidance, the 3 skyward escorts were already in an invincible position. They were all experienced members of the escort agency. After all, and even if they weren't as explosive as Qi Wenhan, they'd at least be able to hold their ground. It wasn't a problem for them to hold their ground. In the end, there was only one person left in the arena. He was the only Golden Core realm expert in the late stage. He didn't disappoint and represented the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency to have the last laugh. Faced with this result, the audience was speechless for a long time. Although no one died in this arena battle, a total of 9 people were eliminated. Among them, except for Qi Wenhan, all of them were seriously injured. The intensity of the battle was evident. In this battle, the Black Eagle Escort Agency sent 5 experts of the Golden Elixir realm to fight. The strength they displayed was not weak, but they still lost in the end. Although they lost, it was still a loss. Perhaps the crowd would still feel sorry for them, but the points would not be discounted. In the 5th round of the Escort Agency Championship, the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency accepted 2 challenges and won both of them. With a dazzling 870 points, they continued to lead the leaderboard, leaving the other 31 escort agencies far behind. Everyone in the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency cheered and celebrated. They surrounded Qi Wenhan and Lin Yi, the 2 greatest contributors to their success. They cheered and jumped for joy, unable to contain their excitement. At that moment, the head escort of the Black Eagle Agency, Zhao Shanying, slowly walked to the front of the crowd under the watchful eyes of the audience. The crowd immediately quieted down and looked at Zhao Shanying cautiously. This person was able to single-handedly rebuild the Black Eagle Agency, and was undoubtedly a formidable character. He had come here with a vengeance, but in the end, he was trampled to the ground by his own heaven's equal escort agency. Faced with such a cruel blow, who knew what he would do next? "You're Lin Yi." Zhao Shanning walked up to Lin Yi and looked him up and down. "That's right. What advice do you have for me?" Lin Yi's expression was calm as he looked him up and down. "You flatter me. I've finally realized something today. The reason why the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was able to rise so quickly was not because of luck, but because of real strength." Zhao Shanning bowed his head to Lin Yi and said in front of everyone, "I'm convinced of your strength in today's battle. You are indeed stronger than my Black Eagle Agency." As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd broke into a flurry of discussion. Chapter 4463. Although the Black Eagle Escort Agency was not one of the top 5 escort agencies, it was recognized as one of the top 5 escort agencies. Now that it had lowered its head to the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, it was clear that the latter's strength was extraordinary. "Chief Escort Zhao, you're exaggerating. Your Black Eagle Escort Agency is not bad either." Lin Yi and Qi Wenhan looked at each other. In fact, if it were not for Lin Yi's strategy, it would be hard to say who would win the battle. The possibility of the Black Eagle Escort Agency having the last laugh was definitely not lower than that of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. "Next time we won't lose." Zhao Shanning smiled confidently. After cupping his hands at Lin Yi and Qi Wenhan, he turned around and returned to the Black Eagle Escort Agency's camp to prepare for the next battle. "Haha, this man is really ambitious. He can afford to lose, but he can also afford to lose." Lin Yi looked at his back and nodded. There were many people in the world who could afford to win, but few could afford to lose. This Zhao Shanning should not be underestimated. Yes, this man is indeed not simple. Although he lost to us this time, he will definitely have a place in the South Continent Escort Agency Alliance in the future. Qi Wenhan agreed. Unless it was someone who had a close relationship with him, Lin Yi would not pay too much attention to insignificant people. However, this time was an exception. He was a little interested in the Black Eagle Escort Agency, especially Zhao Shanning. After a short while, an announcement from the judging team shocked everyone again. "The Black Eagle Escort Agency challenges the Four Seas Escort Agency." The crowd was in an uproar. Even a calm person like Lin Yi could not help but be slightly stunned when he heard the announcement. The focus immediately fell on Zhao Shanning. First, he challenged the brilliant super dark horse of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. In the end, he lost by one person. In a single battle, he lost 5 experts in the Golden Core realm in the South Continent Escort Agency Alliance. Regardless of whether he died or not, at least these 5 people were definitely crippled in this year's South Continent Escort Agency Grand Meet. Such a price. Even those traditional wealthy families could not afford it. Not to mention the newly reorganized Black Eagle Escort Agency. Everyone thought that Zhao Shanning would at least lay low for a period of time, and then pick up a soft persimmon to get back the points that he had just lost. Never had he imagined that this fellow would actually be unyielding to such an extent. He didn't even want to take a break, and directly issued another challenge. Moreover, the target of his challenge was actually the traditional overlord of the Four Seas Escort Agency. At this moment, almost everyone had the same question in their minds. Where did Zhao Shanning get his confidence from? Although the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was in the limelight this time, in terms of absolute strength, the traditional overlord, the Four Seas Escort Agency, was definitely stronger. This was a widely acknowledged fact. Moreover, his Black Eagle Escort Agency couldn't even defeat the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. How dare they take the initiative to challenge the Four Seas Escort Agency? Wasn't this giving up on themselves? Is he prepared to cut off all means of retreat? He does have the bearing of an ambitious and ruthless character. Lin Yi commented with slight admiration. After losing to the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, the Black Eagle Escort Agency's points had dropped from 220 to 120. If they were to lose to the Four Seas Escort Agency again, they would only be left with 20 points. Even if they were not directly eliminated, it wouldn't make much of a difference. This result was a huge blow to the Black Eagle Escort Agency, which was determined to return to the ranks of the top 5 escort agencies. Especially for Zhao Shanning, it was simply a disaster. He might not even be able to hold on until the next South Continent Escort Agency Grand Festival. The entire agency might have already collapsed. Under such circumstances, even if Lin Yi was in Zhao Shanning's position, he might not have the courage to challenge the Four Seas Escort Agency. Although this was the last chance for the Black Eagle Escort Agency to rise again, they had just experienced a defeat. Not to mention the great loss of strength, even their morale was at a low. What were the chances of winning if they challenged the Four Seas Escort Agency now? Trying to use the Four Seas Escort Agency as a stepping stone? There must be something wrong with this guy's brain. What wishful thinking. Boundless Zhonghai snorted disdainfully and glanced at Zhao Shanning in the distance. He originally thought that this person had some ability. If he was more sensible, it would not be impossible to help the Black Eagle Escort Agency become one of the top 5. But now, it seemed that Zhao Shanning was just an arrogant person who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. After a while, both sides were ready. When they appeared, there was an uproar in the audience. On the stage were the participating escorts, all of whom were experts in Golden Core perfection. It was not strange for the Four Seas Escort Agency to send out 5 Golden Core perfection experts. However, the Black Eagle Escort Agency had just lost 5 Golden Core perfection experts. Now they immediately sent out another 5. Such a move was a little shocking. It could be seen that the Black Eagle Escort Agency's slogan of returning to the top 5 escort agencies was not just for show. TCH, so what if you have 5 Golden Core perfection experts? Even among experts of the same level, the difference in strength is like heaven and earth. A random escort from a grassroots escort agency, like you, dares to challenge the elite escorts of my Four Seas Escort Agency? Do you think you're worthy? Boundless Sea sneered. Zhao Shanning had great confidence in his escorts, but Boundless Sea, as the undisputed hegemon of the traditional guilds, had even more confidence than Zhao Shanning. No matter how disdainful Boundless Sea was, in the eyes of most people, this escort agency competition was definitely a battle between the strong. The 2 matches in a row were hot-blooded battles of the top 5. The spectators, who had traveled thousands of miles to watch the show, cheered in satisfaction. In reality, this duel did not disappoint the crowd. From the very beginning, the situation on both sides had become extremely tense. Unlike the nimble tactics of the Equal of Heaven Escort Agency, both sides followed very traditional battle tactics. When the mutual deception and deception on the tactical level had dissipated, the only thing that remained was the desperate fight of the escorts on the arena. It was a bloody battle. This was truly a bloody battle. Blood constantly spilled on the stage. The escorts from both sides were eliminated one after another. Those who were heavily injured and on the verge of death could be considered lucky. Among them, 5 died on the spot. In the end, there was only one person left on the stage. This time, it was the Black Eagle Escort Agency who had the last laugh. Looking at the blood-soaked Black Eagle Escort standing on the stage, watching his swaying figure on the verge of collapsing, the entire cold magic plaza fell silent. After 2 tough battles in a row, they had first lost to the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. Now they had dramatically regained their dignity against the Four Seas Escort Agency, which was even more powerful. No one knew what to say about such a miraculous turn of events. Chapter 4464. On the other side, Boundless Sea, who was sitting in the middle of the judging panel, watched all of this from afar. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He still couldn't believe it. How could the elites of the Four Seas Escort Agency lose? He could only watch as the Four Seas Escort Agency's points plummeted from 240 to 140. No matter how much Boundless Sea didn't believe it, he could only helplessly accept reality. Sent motherfucker. This bullshit Black Eagle Escort Agency lost to the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. And now they're venting their anger on the Four Seas Escort Agency. How preposterous. Wah! Boundless Sea gnashed his teeth in anger. His first reaction wasn't to hate Zhao Shannying, but to glare at the distant Lin Yi with hatred. He cursed in his heart. Ling 1, Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. I won't let you have it easy. I won't. Just you wait. Lin Yi naturally didn't know that this person was such a weirdo. As the head escort of a traditional overlord, he didn't even have this much bearing. Moreover, he was venting his anger on him for no reason. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If he knew what Boundless Sea was thinking right now, his first thought would be that Boundless Sea had gone crazy, that he was hopeless, that he was a classic case of paranoia. Of course, Lin Yi didn't know what Boundless Sea was thinking. He didn't care about what Boundless Sea was thinking. Boundless Sea was the overlord of the South Continent Escort Agency Alliance, but in Lin Yi's eyes, he didn't have any weight to speak of. He was just an arrogant passerby. That was all. Some were happy, some were sad. After the intense battle between the Black Eagle Escort Agency and the Four Seas Escort Agency, the fifth round of the Escort Agency competition continued. As long as there was a chance for them to advance further, no matter how small, no one was willing to fall behind. After all, the ranking of the South Continent Escort Agency Alliance would directly determine their business prospects for the next 5 years. This was their rice bowl, and in these battles, for a time, the one in the limelight wasn't the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency or the Four Seas Escort Agency, but the Black Eagle Escort Agency under Zhao Shannying. The Dark Hawk Escort Agency's arena battles were too intense. After fighting head-on against the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency and the Four Seas Escort Agency, although they had used up their right to initiate challenges twice, they still had 2 chances to be challenged. He did not know if someone was deliberately instructing them, or if these escort agencies really wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Black Eagle Escort Agency's vitality was greatly weakened, so that they could quickly step on them. In any case, the 2 chances to be challenged were used up in less than an hour. Although the opponents of these 2 battles were not as gimmicky as the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency and the Four Seas Escort Agency, they were not weak either. At least, they were stable escort agencies that were above average. On the other hand, the mysterious Eagle Escort Agency had already used up a total of 10 experts in the Golden Elixir Realm Consummation, so it was impossible for them to send out such a strong lineup again. In both battles, there was only 1 expert in the Golden Elixir Realm Consummation. However, even so, the Black Eagle Escort Agency still managed to have the last laugh. Even if the team that Zhao Shannying brought up was not a first-line lineup, it was enough to defeat these mid-tier escort agencies. They still appeared to be at ease and unassailable. In the 4 battles, apart from losing to the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency at the beginning, the next 3 battles included the Four Seas Escort Agency. They won all of them, and the Black Eagle Escort Agency's points shot up to 420 points. Previously, they were in a precarious position, but now they had entered the top 5 and were in 4th place. Of course, if it weren't for the fact that the other major escort agencies had also obtained a significant number of points, the Black Eagle Escort Agency's results would have been in the top 3 before. On the other hand, as the host of this year's conference, the Four Seas Escort Agency was already in 3rd place after the first 4 rounds. Now that they had suffered a blow from the Black Eagle Escort Agency, even if they won 2 battles in a row, they were still unable to reverse their decline. They were in 5th place with 340 points, and were trampled by the Black Eagle Escort Agency. Facing this helpless result, Boundless Sea was seething with anger. If it wasn't for the fact that the escort agency's helmsman had challenged them at the bottom, giving him a chance to make a comeback, and still feeling that he could still control the situation, he would have probably flown into a rage on the spot. In reality, in the 5th round of the Escort Agency Championship, the Four Seas Escort Agency was the same as the other 5 major escort agencies. They had only fought 3 battles, and used up 2 of their rights to challenge, and 1 of their rights to be challenged. As for the remaining 1 of their rights to be challenged, it was only for show. After all, not every escort agency was as aggressive as the Black Eagle Escort Agency, and not every person in charge of an escort agency was as bold as Zhao Shannying. Asking them to take the initiative to challenge the Four Seas escort agency was a foolish thing that would obviously result in them losing points. They might as well just let them die. In comparison, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency and the Black Eagle Escort Agency, which were also part of the 5 major escort agencies, were much luckier. Because they were more or less looked down upon, their 2 rights to be challenged were not wasted at all, and they delivered a full 200 points to their doorstep. This made the other 5 escort agencies so envious that their eyeballs were about to bleed. Especially Boundless Sea. He had long since regarded first place as his in the bag. Now that the 5th round of the escort agency championship was about to end, not only was he unable to close the gap between him and the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, but the gap was growing wider and wider. Now, he was being trampled under the feet of the Black Eagle Escort Agency. How could he endure this? Before this, whether it was the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency or the Black Eagle Escort Agency, the public's opinion was always mixed. They were not like the traditional powerhouses like the Four Seas Escort Agency, who were full of praise for them. They felt that these 2 agencies were just nouveau riche with no foundation, and could only be proud of themselves for a while. But now, no one would harbor such foolish thoughts. Not only did the Black Eagle Escort Agency's points surpass the Four Seas Escort Agency's, more importantly, they had defeated the Four Seas Escort Agency in the highly prestigious Escort Agency Championship, and this was under the premise that they had fought against the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency. If this was considered as having no foundation, then what was the Four Seas Escort Agency? As a result, the Black Eagle Escort Agency's strength was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, enough to become the consensus of the public. Everyone knew that this newly reorganized Grassy Escort Agency's strength was not to be underestimated. At the same time, this also proved another thing. The Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's strength was even greater. The Four Seas Escort Agency became the Black Eagle Escort Agency's stepping stone, and the Black Eagle Escort Agency became the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's touchstone. The stronger the Four Seas Escort Agency was, the more it proved that the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency was truly invincible. Chapter 4465. From this, one could see that the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency's current lead in the leaderboard was due to their true strength, and not some so-called luck. As a matter of fact, there was no logic to the argument of dogs hit luck. It was not the first time that the South Continent Escort Agency Gala had been held, and the intensity and cruelty of the competition had long exceeded the level of an ordinary competition. Under such circumstances, if a weak escort agency could emerge and laugh all the way to the end purely by sheer luck, was it possible? If that really happened, it could only mean that the 32 South Continent's escort agencies were all fake goods, and none of them were truly wealthy. Otherwise, if there was a truly powerful escort agency, they would not have allowed a clown to take first place. That would be a disgrace to the entire South Continent's escort agency alliance. Accompanied by a wave of heavy sounds of the gong, the 5th round of the escort agency competition finally came to an end. After this round of the Law of the Jungle, the situation on the scoreboard had become even more clear and obvious. The first place on the leaderboard was, without a doubt, the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, which had surpassed all the other escort agencies behind it with a ridiculously high score of 1,070 points. After eliminating the Black Eagle Escort Agency with much difficulty, Chi Wen-han still held the precious right to initiate 2 challenges in his hands. Naturally, he would not let it go to waste for no reason. After weighing the pros and cons, he finally chose to make a move on the 2 middle-ranked escort agencies. Without any surprises or danger, he obtained 200 points. Only then did his points reach the staggering 4-digit number of Long Feng Wenxue. In fact, after witnessing the Black Eagle Agency trampling over the Four Seas Escort Agency, Chi Wen-han had thought of adding insult to injury. However, after the previous perilous experience, his father, Chi Mingyuan, was afraid that something might go wrong, and was determined not to let him fight personally. The series of fierce battles had already exhausted much of his strength. If Qi Wenhan did not fight personally, it would be difficult for him to win against the flustered and exasperated Four Seas escort agency. Even if they had Lin Yi as their coach, it would not be enough unless Lin Yi personally fought. However, that was impossible. After all, there was still another round of challenges for the leader of the escort agency. Lin Yi was in the eye of the storm, and so many people were eyeing him with malicious intent. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency was followed by the Divine Wind Escort Agency and the Great Sky Escort Agency. These two veteran escort agencies were ranked second and third respectively. The Dark Eagle Escort Agency, which had recently gained strength, was right behind them. He was ranked fourth. As for the ambitious Four Seas Escort Agency, the publicly acknowledged tyrant of South Continent's escort agencies, they had no choice but to face the awkward situation of being in fifth place. Even with Boundless Sea's thick skin, when someone's gaze swept over him, even if it was just a casual glance, he would feel a burning sensation and be too embarrassed to face anyone. All of this was caused by Ling Yi and the Equal Heaven Escort Agency. Boundless Sea's heart bled. He gritted his teeth and cursed viciously. Other than that, there was nothing else he could do. He could only hope that the upcoming good show would go as he wished. At the same time that he killed Ling Yi and the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, his Four Seas Escort Agency would be able to snatch back the limelight and continue to be the overlord of the escort agencies. Although the Four Seas Escort Agency was in an awkward situation, in comparison, being able to barely get on the last train of the five great escort agency meant that they were able to keep their last shred of shame. The truly pitiful one was the Southgate Escort Agency. Previously, it had been one of the five great escort agency. But now, after 5 rounds of competition, they were ranked 6th. They had been forced out of the ranks of the 5 great escort agency, instantly losing the halo of a powerhouse and becoming a second-rate escort agency. They couldn't even cry. According to this ranking, it could be foreseen that the future structure of the South Continent Escort Agency Alliance would undergo a huge change. Among this change, only 2 escort agencies would be the true winners. One was the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, and the other was the Dark Eagle Escort Agency. Among them, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's gains were the most exaggerated. This could be seen from the way the managers looked at the Heavens Equal Escort Agency. Many of these people were clients of the traditional powerhouses of the Four Seas Escort Agency. However, it looked like they would soon become history. If everything went according to plan, after the South Continent Escort Agency Grand Meet, the huge orders placed on the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's head would undoubtedly reach an astronomical figure. It would be at least a few times more than the previous years, perhaps even dozens of times more. The more orders there were, the more spiritual jades there would be. The more spiritual jades there were, the more powerful escorts they would be able to recruit, rapidly increase their strength, and obtain more orders. This was a snowball effect. Once things got on the right track, no one would be able to stop the Heavens Equal Escort Agency from rising. However, before that, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency had to overcome another hurdle, the upcoming challenge of the agency's helmsman. Just like the 5th round of the Escort Agency Grand Meet, this was also a duel in which each agency had to bet 100 points. The only difference was that this was a one-on-one challenge, specifically targeted at the Golden Core stage executives of each agency. Moreover, there was no limit to the number of challenges. This sort of competition did not test the agency's overall strength. Instead, it was entirely dependent on the individual's performance. Luck played a huge part. If an agency was unlucky enough to be challenged by the experts of other agencies, the slightest mistake could lead to the agency's collapse. 100 points per battle, and there was no limit to the number of challenges. No matter how many points they had, they would not be able to afford to lose. Although the Heavens Equal Escort Agency's current 4-digit points were daunting, it was hard to say if they could safely survive the next round. Perhaps they would fall from the clouds into the abyss. One moment, they were at the peak of their power, but the next moment, they would be nothing more than a flash in the pan. As long as the dust hadn't truly settled, there were still variables. Even though the top 5 escort agencies were obvious on the leaderboard, because of the extra segment at the end, even the losers like the Southgate Escort Agency still had a chance of making it to the top 5. Who would be ranked among the top 5 agencies, and who would have the last laugh? Everything was still up in the air. Alright, on behalf of the judging panel, I will now announce the rules for the final challenge of the agency's helmsman. Boundless Sea suppressed the hatred in his heart and stood up to announce to the crowd. The rules are very simple. The first challenger will be decided by drawing lots. He can challenge any Golden Core Stage executive of any agency. The winner of each round can choose to continue the challenge. Of course, he can also choose to forfeit. If the winner forfeits, the right to challenge will be transferred to the loser. If the loser chooses to forfeit, then a new lot will be drawn. The crowd broke into a flurry of discussion. At least on the surface, the rules seemed fair. At the very least, the challenges were not unbridled and completely reckless. Chapter 4466. If the lot drawing process can be guaranteed to be fair, and no one tampered with the results, then it sounds reasonable. Everyone will rely on their own strength and luck. There's nothing much to say. Chi Wenhan stared blankly. He had thought that since this challenge was aimed at his own escort agency, it would be as shameless as possible. He didn't think that this rule would sound so righteous and irresponsible. Chi Wenhan was most worried about his own escort agency being ganged up on. Taking turns to wear them down was something even an immortal made of steel wouldn't be able to handle. However, Boundless Sea's rule basically eliminated the possibility of taking turns to wear them down, unless someone won against him or Ling won and kept challenging them. But this way, the other side would also be fighting continuously. Both sides would be on the same starting line. Who would emerge as the victor would be decided by their fists. Brother Chi, do the other escort agencies also have Golden Core Stage executives? Linny wasn't so optimistic and suddenly asked. Chi Wenhan was at a loss for words. The little bit of joy and excitement he felt from winning the 5th round of the escort agency tournament vanished in an instant. With an ugly expression he said, I don't know the specifics, but it shouldn't be much. Looks like it. Boundless Sea was probably aiming for this from the start. Linny glanced at the nearby Boundless Sea. At the same time, he glanced at Chung Haonan's group of 3, who were giving him strange looks. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that these two groups had some sort of connection. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any connection between the two groups. However, Ling Yi's intuition had always been accurate. He could see some clues from their expressions. A moment later, the judging panel picked out the names of all the Golden Core Stage executives from the escort agencies and announced it to the public. Sure enough, out of all 32 escort agencies, only 12 of them had Gold Core Stage executives, which was less than half of them. Even though the audience had some idea, they were still shocked when they saw this number. Among the 12 escort agencies, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was the most eye-catching. The young master Chi Wenhan and honorary escort head Ling Wen were both on the list. Apart from the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, the other 5 major escort agencies, including the newly established Black Eagle Escort Agency, were not on the list. The remaining 11 escort agencies were mostly middling escort agencies. They were neither too strong nor too weak. The Dragon Boat Escort Agency was also one of them. This kind of situation was not difficult to understand. There were many experts among those powerful escort agencies, and it was possible that any ordinary escort had the strength of the late Gold Core Stage and above. This was especially so for the Four Seas Escort Agency and the Black Eagle Escort Agency. The number of Golden Core Paragon experts they had was more than enough to count with 2 hands. As the higher-ups, if they didn't even have the strength of the original infant stage, how could they convince the masses? As for the weaker escort agencies, they were small in scale and didn't have positions such as young head of escort, deputy head of escort, elder, military advisor, and the like. There was no need to set up such positions at all, as it would only result in the decentralization of power. Under normal circumstances, A small escort agency would have at most one or two other escorts in addition to the chief escort. There were no other senior executives. Although the South Continent Escort Agency Festival was a big event, and most of the escort agencies had sent out their elites, it was impossible for them to leave no one behind. At least one escort would be left behind to take care of the rear. As a result, in the list of escorts reported by most of the smaller escort agencies, there was only the chief escort leading the team. It was like a commander without an army. Since he was the chief escort of an escort agency, he couldn't be an expert at the Golden Core stage. Nascent Soul stage was the minimum requirement, so he naturally wasn't on the list. Moreover, there were some escort agencies that were special, but like the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, they had a young escort. Their strength was most likely at the Golden Core stage, but the problem was that most of them were guarding the rear. They couldn't send people all the way here at the last minute, could they? That wasn't realistic. Even if these escort agencies agreed, the festival couldn't wait that long. There weren't any first-rate escort agencies, nor any low-end escort agencies. The most likely ones to have Golden Core higher-ups were those middling escort agencies. The Heavens Equal Escort Agency was the only exception. This was Boundless Sea's original intention in proposing this challenge. By proposing this rule, an escort agency like the Four Seas Escort Agency, which didn't have any Golden Core higher-ups, was naturally invincible. They were the only ones who could challenge others, while others couldn't do anything to them. They could attack or retreat as they pleased. On the contrary, the 12 escort agencies, including the Heavens Equal Escort Agency, had become the real prey. As long as they were interested, they could pounce and take a bite. If it wasn't enough, they could take a second bite, or a third bite. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had the strength to do so. If they weren't strong enough, not only would they not be able to take a bite out of the prey, but they would also be kicked half to death. Qi Wenhan frowned. Although the situation wasn't as bad as he had imagined, it wasn't much better either. Among the 12 prey on the list, the Heavens Equal Escort Agency was not only the strongest, but also the one that attracted the most attention. It was almost certain that they would be targeted by others. However, Lenny didn't seem worried at all. Even though he knew that this so-called escort agency leader challenge was aimed at him, he didn't take it to heart. The only thing he cared about was whether he had a chance to kill Wu Baoliang. Fortunately, he didn't disappoint me. Lenny looked at Wu Baoliang's name on the public list and couldn't help but smile. The conference was about to end, but he still couldn't get a chance to fight Wu Baoliang. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't anxious at all. After all, who was willing to waste time in the South Continent for Wu Baoliang? But now, this additional challenge would make him the target of everyone, but at the same time, it gave him a chance to challenge Wu Baoliang. In comparison, Lenny felt that it was a good deal. Anyway, with his current strength, he was absolutely invincible in the Golden Core stage. No matter how many people came to challenge him, they would just be giving away points. It was not worth mentioning at all. Seeing that Lenny was so calm, Qi Wenhan couldn't help but be speechless. He admired Lin Yi's strength, but he didn't know how strong Lin Yi was. In the face of such a situation, it was impossible for him not to panic. However, even if he panicked, it was useless. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the escort agency leader challenge officially began. The first thing to do was to draw lots. 5 judges supervised together, and there were countless pairs of eyes watching from below the stage to ensure that no one could cheat. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.